If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 201, Chapter 199, A Dance of Destruction. Kaijo quickly discovered that Fukuda Sogo's defense was formidable, leaving them breathless in their attempts to break through. Attempts to penetrate from the shooting guard position were persistently thwarted by Mochizuki's unwavering defense. This forced Moriyama to often pass the ball to either Kasamatsu or Kai's. The pattern repeated on Kaijo's side, with players frequently resorting to passing to Kasamatsu or Kai's. As the ball found its way into Kasamatsu's hands, he often succumbed to Tsuna's relentless defense, ultimately passing it to Kai's. Amidst the fervent cheers from the audience, Midorima's eyes flashed with understanding as he adjusted his glasses. Glancing at Kasamatsu's figure on the court, Midorima thought, he should have realized it sooner. He shook his head in mild disapproval and continued to calmly observe the ongoing game. As the game progressed, the focus remained on Haizaki and Kai's, with Kai's attempting moves he had copied from the past, only for Haizaki to consistently steal and counter them. Kasamatsu gritted his teeth annoyedly as he carefully dribbled the ball in his hand, with Tsuna closing in. Taking a deep breath, Kasamatsu altered his pace, dribbling the ball behind his back to the left. Simultaneously adjusting his body weight to the front, he accelerated, once again maneuvering the ball between his legs with Tsuna in close pursuit. Sensing the opportune moment, Kasamatsu's eyes glinted with a fierce light. Good timing, he thought. In a swift move, he spun his body right in front of Tsuna, masking his intention to pierce through Tsuna's defense. The dribble aimed right between his legs, intricately connected to Tsuna's legs as well. As the ball passed through his legs, Kasamatsu's expression brightened, realizing it had also slipped through Tsuna's defense. He burst forward with agility, ready to snatch the ball once again. However, Tsuna, sporting a light smirk, instantly stepped back. With his left hand, he effortlessly grabbed the ball that had slipped behind him, seamlessly dribbling it behind his back to his right hand. In a burst of speed, Tsuna left Kasamatsu trailing behind, who cursed in disbelief, "Fuck, he lured me into it." With the game's momentum unexpectedly shifting, Kaijo hurriedly scrambled to catch up, their players chasing after Tsuna, who swiftly advanced toward their basket. Among them, Kai's reacted the fastest, leaving Haizaki behind to pursue Tsuna. "What a fool!" Haizaki exclaimed. He immediately chased after them to get in a good position. "Kazamaki!" Kai's shouted excitedly, fully committing to the chase. With remarkable speed, he closed the distance between him and Tsuna, surprising even Tsuna himself. Kai's forcefully slowed down, his feet adjusting in a way that made his muscles tingle with discomfort. However, the important thing was that Kai's had caught up with Tsuna. Gritting his teeth, Kai's opened his arms, adopting a solid defensive form to halt Tsuna's advance. Displaying calm composure, Tsuna eased his pace, deftly dribbling the ball as Kai's closed in. Casually glancing at the timer, Tsuna realized there was just a minute left in the first quarter and thought, this is not what I was expecting. The game seemed to be dragging a bit, prompting Tsuna to recognize the need to expedite their progress. "Then, I'll give you a bit more pressure, Ryota," Tsuna mumbled with a light smile, causing Kai's hair to stand on end. Kai's eyes sharpened as he sensed Tsuna about to make a move. As expected, Tsuna suddenly altered the pace of his dribble, prompting Kai's widened eyes as he silently thought, this is his specialty. Haizaki, too, widened his eyes, realizing Tsuna wasn't planning to pass the ball as expected. He thought, what? This isn't like him. Is he planning something? Haizaki couldn't help but click his tongue as Kaijo's captain closed in on him, understanding that even if Tsuna changed his mind mid-action, passing to him wouldn't be guaranteed. In their clash, Kai struggled to keep pace with Tsuna's speedy dribbling. He closely followed Tsuna, knowing that relaxing his defense could leave him vulnerable. "I won't let you slip by, Kazamaki." Gritting his teeth, Kai focused on avoiding whatever trap Tsuna might be setting. Tsuna's lightning-fast dribbling moves left Kai almost breathless. The ball danced between Tsuna's legs, behind him, and even in front with such speed that Kai struggled to keep up. Then came the moment Kai anticipated. Suddenly, Tsuna crossed over to the left, and Kai's eyes gleamed with anticipation. He treaded carefully, expecting Tsuna to change direction abruptly. "This is his ankle break, but I've already expected that," so Kai's triumphant thought was abruptly halted as Tsuna's figure appeared to grow even taller. A confused voice escaped Kai's, "What?" As if by magic, Tsuna's lightning-fast dribble vanished. He was calmly dribbling the ball, nonchalantly looking down at Kai's, who had fallen to the ground with a bewildered expression. The gymnasium erupted into chaos as Tsuna's ankle-breaking move left the crowd in a frenzy of excitement and disbelief. Holy cow! Kai's just got owned. Expressions of shock and awe were plastered across the faces of the spectators. What the heck? Call an ambulance! Someone urgently suggested, prompting a bewildered response from another attendee. Hey? Why are you calling an ambulance? A scoff followed, accompanied by an incredulous retort, are you seriously asking that right now? Of course, because Kai's had his legs broken, you dumbass. Meanwhile, Kai's remained in a confused state, grappling with how he fell for a move he anticipated. I thought you were confident because you had something under your sleeve, but it seems like I was mistaken. Tsuna's cold words served as a harsh reality check. Kai's turned to look at Tsuna, whose expression remained nonchalant, but genuine disappointment emanated from him, silencing Kai's. Helplessly, Kai's watched Tsuna from below as the icy gaze seemed to pierce through his soul, making it difficult to breathe. Shaking his head, Tsuna smoothly transitioned into his shooting motion. With calm precision, he released the ball, and it soared through the air without a hint of deviation. The net echoed with a satisfying swish as the ball effortlessly found its mark. Yet, Tsuna didn't spare a glance at the ball. Instead, he turned back to Kai's and uttered, Ryota, I was expecting more but this is quite disappointing. These cold words proved more frustrating to Kai's than the defeat he experienced back when they played together in Tsuna's residence. Chapter 202, Chapter 200, Happily dancing on his palm. Kai's seemed to be aware of what Kazama was about to do, but how did he still fall for it? Hyuga couldn't help but express his confusion, grimacing at the recent turn of events on the court. Others shared a similar sentiment, their expressions turning grim as they observed the unfolding scene. Kuroko, any insights on how that went down? Kiyoshi turned to the light blue-haired player, seeking answers. However, Kuroko confessed his uncertainty with a slight shake of his head. I'm not entirely sure myself, to be honest. I think it might have something to do with Kai's balance, Kagami chimed in suddenly, drawing the attention of everyone in Siren toward him. Even if Kai's anticipated Tsuna's move, a slight imbalance could still send him tumbling. It's that simple. Shudoku collectively gasped in surprise at Midorima's concise explanation. But how did he manage to throw Kai's off balance? Miyagi voiced the confusion shared by everyone. Midorima adjusted his glasses, recalling someone with a similar ankle-breaking ability. Although their techniques differed, he elaborated, typically, in fast-paced player confrontations, defenders need to adjust their stance. Any sudden change in direction during this crucial moment can disrupt their balance, causing them to lose footing. While such instances were rare at the highest level of play, where top-tier players usually maintained exceptional and consistent footing, it remained a possibility under the strain of fatigue and lack of focus. What does it mean that Fukuda Sogo's captain was sharp enough to catch that vulnerable moment during the adjustment? Midorima shook his head in response to the inquiry, refuting the notion. He was aware of someone who could exploit this precise moment to execute an ankle break. But it was not Tsuna. No? Then how did he manage it? I'm not certain if Tsuna could actually see these moments. However, unlike others, Tsuna didn't exploit such vulnerabilities. Midorima explained, his expression turning grim. He forcefully creates this imbalance in the defender's body weight with his movements. Midorima believed it didn't really matter if someone anticipated Tsuna's intentions because Tsuna would lead them to follow his movements, compelling the imbalance to occur. Akashi closely observed Tsuna's movements on the court. With his emperor eyes, he could execute the exact same ankle break as he was able to exploit the defender's moment of adjustment. Though he was aware of it since middle school. Witnessing someone execute the move with force impressed him. However, that won't work on me, Tsuyonashi. He muttered with quiet confidence, his eyes ablaze with certainty. As the first quarter neared its end, Fukuda Sogo escalated their pace. Following Tsuna's directive to quicken the tempo, they were determined not to let Hizaki steal the limelight, and other players started contributing to the scoring. The heightened tempo exerted immense pressure on Kaijo's players. They began to grasp the consequences of allowing Fukuda Sogo to dictate the game, the gap would only widen further. Kasumatsu sensed something awry for a while but couldn't pinpoint the issue. Frustration clenched his teeth as he thought, damn it, I suppose we're left with no choice but to rely on Kai's. As soon as the thought crossed his mind, realization widened Kasumatsu's eyes, and his mind raced with newfound awareness. When did we stop looking for and creating openings beyond relying solely on Kai's? Kazumatsu's internal dialogue continued, a flood of scenes from the start of the game replaying in his mind. The thunderous sound of the ball slamming into the basket jolted him back from his introspection. Tsuna had effortlessly broken past his defense as he soared for a dunk. The referee's whistle marked the end of the first quarter. Surprised, Kazumatsu's eyes widened, but anger quickly twisted his expression. He couldn't help but turn toward Tsuna, who smirked and remarked, "What a nasty bastard." "Oh, please. I thought we got along quite well, Captain." Tsuna shook his head while making his way toward Fukuda Sogo's bench, his teammates trailing behind. Kazumatsu clenched his fist in a mix of frustration and anger as he headed toward his own bench with his team. "They've had us figured out from the start, hey." Kaijo's coach, Takuchi, spoke with a frown, massaging his temple in mild annoyance. Kazumatsu nodded, leaving the others puzzled. He shook his head, explaining, "That guy led us to believe that there was no other option but to pass the ball to Kai's for whatever reason." "What?" Loud exclamations erupted from everyone in Kaijo, with even Kai's visibly surprised. He turned towards Tsuna on the opposite side, questioning, "Why did he have to do that?" "I don't know why, but it still leaves a bad taste in my mouth." Kazumatsu responded grimly, letting out a sigh. At the start, they showed off a powerful move that got Kaijo's attention. This made Kaijo feel like they might be a bit careless, making them more alert. Meanwhile, Fukuda Sogo set up their defense in a way that basically forced Kaijo to choose between passing to Kai's or Kazumatsu. Because they thought they were already on high alert, passing to Kai's seemed to be the obvious and natural choice for them. Moreover, having Kazumatsu as another choice gave the Kaijo players a false sense of security as if nothing was missing. So, they fell for it without even realizing. They got so focused on passing to Kai's that they didn't try to find openings elsewhere on the court. But why the sudden change of pace at the end? Kazumatsu pondered in silence, his gaze shifting to Tsuna, who appeared engaged in a discussion with his team. Did he come to the realization that continually involving Kai's with Haizaki was futile? Or is there another motive? What exactly is he trying to achieve? Despite his reluctance to acknowledge it, even if they were to comprehend Tsuna's intentions, Kazumatsu wasn't sure if they could identify a viable alternative within the limited time they had, ultimately leading them back to involving Kai's. The sudden shift in Tsuna's plan left Kazumatsu utterly bewildered. He struggled to grasp Tsuna's intentions, unable to comprehend the reason behind the change. Kaijo's coach found it challenging to understand the situation, frowning as he turned his attention to Fukuda Sogo's captain. He thought, "That kid is definitely a scary opponent, but I can't figure out what he's up to." Letting out a sigh, he shifted his focus back to his own players, saying, "Even though we're not at a disadvantage with his unclear intentions, the real problem is their attacks from all directions. So, our main priority should be to tighten up our defense." Choosing not to dwell too much on the mysterious actions of the opponent, Takuchi decided to concentrate on Kaijo's plan to regain control of the game. Chapter 203, Christmas Special. Trailer Chapter, title at the end of the chapter. A man silently gazed down at the city's night view from a skyscraper, lost in contemplation as he observed the bustling nightlife below. In his 20s, he possessed a striking handsomeness that was accentuated by his dark hair. Dressed in an opulent ensemble reminiscent of aristocratic grandeur, his attire blended regal black with a subtle infusion of red and a golden sheen. As his eyes, gleaming red under the dim light, scanned the city below, it seemed as though he could pierce through the distance between the building and the ground. Even from high above, observing the activities on the ground, he chuckled as if he had just witnessed an amusing interaction on this busy night. His name was Tsuno. In this life, he went by Raymond. He was 24 years old. Different from his previous life where he reincarnated as a baby, this time, he found himself in the body of a street beggar kid 12 years ago. Observing his surroundings and collecting information about the world he now inhabited, Raymond discovered that he had been reincarnated into a special world where strength was the ultimate power. 12 years had passed since he arrived in this world. However, as soon as he sifted through the files on his desk, the door to his office swung open forcefully, and a middle-aged man in his 30s entered with a solemn expression. Observing the middle-aged man's demeanor, Raymond furrowed his brow and asked, "Is something wrong?" The middle-aged man nodded. "Albert was killed. Do you know who did it?" Raymond sighed upon hearing the report, massaging his temple slightly. Albert was his representative in this city, an essential figure for his plan to succeed. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Albert's existence was akin to a crucial support for navigating the city. We haven't found out who did it yet, but we've apprehended someone we believe is a scout for the person responsible for Albert's death. The middle-aged man shook his head slightly while delivering the report. Raymond stood up and said, "Let's see the scout." The middle-aged man nodded, and they left the room, making their way to the lift. Entering the lift, the middle-aged man didn't simply press a button to select a floor. Instead, he expertly pressed a sequence of buttons, revealing it to be some sort of coded entry for their underground base. Raymond stood by patiently, observing the intricate process. With the completion of the coded sequence, the lift began its descent. Ding! The lift chimed as it reached the underground level, opening up to expose a dimly lit corridor with various rooms on either side. They strolled through the corridor until reaching a room with glass partitions, witnessing one of their men confronting someone they suspected to be the scout. "Have mercy, please." The scout pleaded desperately, his entire body battered and in a wretched state after enduring brutal torture. "Spill it. Who's behind these needles?" Their subordinate thrust the needles before the scout, causing his eyes to widen in terror. Despite this, he kept his lips sealed, prompting their subordinate to persist in the relentless beating. "What are those needles?" Raymond inquired, detecting a hint of a familiar, lingering energy within the needles. However, the middle-aged man shaking his head slightly. "It's likely the murder weapon found on Albert's lifeless body." "I understand." Raymond sighed, then entered the room. Detecting an incoming presence, the subordinate furrowed his brows, turning to identify the newcomer. Recognizing his boss, he quickly softened his expression, offering a respectful bow before stepping away from the battered scout. The sudden departure of the man who had been subjecting him to torture made the scout turn. As Raymond approached, the scout couldn't help but plead once again, his voice filled with desperation, "Please, spare me." The room felt heavy with tension, a mix of fear, confusion, and a desperate plea for mercy hanging in the air. But Raymond just coldly glared down at the scout with his crimson eyes. He kneeled down and grabbed the scout by the neck, causing him to groan in pain. "Unfortunately, you're not saying what you're supposed to say," he whispered into the scout's ear, sending shivers down the scout's spine. The scout realized he was in a tight spot, caught by someone ruthless, and his mind went blank. The other guy in the room got what was going to happen and quietly closed the door. Before long, the room echoed with the pained voice of the scout. The sounds of desperation continued until the middle-aged man firmly shut the door, leaving an eerie silence behind. Please, kill me." Raymond's lips curled into a sinister smile as the scout pleaded for an end. He applauded mockingly, "Now, you're saying the correct words. Well done." The scout continued to beg like a broken doll, and Raymond turned to his subordinate, who watched in awe. "Get the information we needed," Raymond stated before he strolled out of the room, leaving behind a parting command, "and grant him the death he so desires afterward." Exiting the room, Raymond entered another space with grey walls, featuring a substantial mahogany table encircled by plush leather chairs. "Master, we've got some news about the thing you've asked." The middle-aged man handed over a paper containing the information Raymond had requested a long time ago. As Raymond perused the paper in his hand, his eyebrows lifted in response to what he discovered. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man was pretty puzzled about why his master wanted info from such a small island. But, he was used to his master's ways, so he didn't question it anymore. After a while, the subordinate responsible for dealing with the scout entered, presenting the information extracted from their captive. "Looks like we've got a challenging one here," Raymond muttered, sifting through the details in his hand. "Should we brace ourselves for a war?" The middle-aged man spoke, displaying a fearlessness toward the one responsible for the assassination of their representative in the city. However, the same couldn't be said for the subordinate who handed over the information. He visibly flinched at the mention of the word war. Luckily, Raymond shook his head, bringing a sense of relief to the subordinate. "We've got enough strength to take them on, but they're assassins. It'd be a hassle if we can't wipe them out all at once," he explained, evoking a serious expression from the middle-aged man who understood the frustration of dealing with assassins who vanish when cornered and strike only when it suits them. "They're like a stubborn nest of rats," Raymond continued, emphasizing the persistent nature of assassins. The subordinate gulped upon hearing Raymond likening the assassins to rats. He couldn't conceal the admiration in his eyes, thinking, the only person who could call them bunch rats is probably only our master in the whole continent. Raymond dropped the info on the table, shifting his focus to the needle they found in Albert's body, the murder weapon. Well, I'll handle this myself. Lucky for us, I know where this little rat ran off to. His face cracked into a smirk, making everyone else in the room flinch. The middle-aged man nodded without saying anything. The other guy looked surprised and asked, "How do you know where he went?" Raymond didn't say a word. Instead, he grabbed the paper the middle-aged man had just given him and tossed it over to the other guy. The subordinate effortlessly caught the paper, unfolding it to read, "The swamp master on Whale Island got nabbed by a kid." This only deepened the subordinate's confusion. Nevertheless, he shook his head, deciding it would be better if he didn't know anything. Meanwhile, Raymond's smirk remained as he quietly muttered, "Interesting. Looks like I've got a hunt ahead of me before heading to that place." Title: Hunting Izaldik. Chapter 204, Chapter 201, A Vicious Adversary. Meanwhile, on Fukuda Sogo's bench, Tsuna's gaze shifted from Kaijo, lingering on Kai's for a moment, before turning to Haizaki. "Let's pick up the pace in the second round." Watching Haizaki's improvement firsthand, Tsuna acknowledged the guy's skills, recognizing that he had outdone even the uncrowned kings in overall ability, supposedly reaching the starting point of the generation of miracles. The same went for Nijimura, who managed to handle Murasakibara using his night perception, placing him at the basic level of the generation of miracles. However, Tsuna's presence had completely changed the original power dynamic, making the generation of miracles even stronger. Despite this significant shift, Tsuna found it interesting that Haizaki couldn't entirely outshine Kai's, as it was supposed to be following the pattern of the original storyline. It was a bit surprising for him. Ryota has certainly come a long way, hasn't he? In the original story, Kai's pushed himself despite injuries, motivated by his defeat at the hands of Aomine during the Inter-High. However, with Tsuna's presence during that time, Aomine, who hadn't taken Kai seriously, unconsciously put in more effort to end the game quickly. This resulted in a lighter injury for Kai's, as Aomine had thoroughly dominated him without straining his body too much. And seeing Tsuna defeat Aomine must have been an awakening for the blonde-haired generation of miracles. With his fully healed injury, Kai's reached greater heights compared to the original storyline. Tsuna didn't care much about Kai's at the moment. It was great that Kai's had improved, as he was one of the talents Tsuna wanted to scout. But his priority for today's game remained his main agenda. Well, if Haizaki wasn't enough to force him to reveal his hidden card, then I'll apply more pressure to his entire team. Tsuna considered it the best option for the moment. He wanted Haizaki to confront his weaknesses. Despite the newfound determination Haizaki had lit up back in the States, Tsuna deemed it insufficient. He believed Haizaki needed a reality check, especially from someone he despised. Understanding Haizaki's character well, Tsuna knew this was necessary. "Hideki, I need you to get in faster than we originally planned." Tsuna turned to Ishida, who eagerly nodded with a wide smile, excited about the upcoming play. "And Kazuhiro, I hope you don't mind being subbed out earlier." Turning to Mochizuki, Tsuna continued. Mochizuki sighed, feeling a bit unfortunate but not discontent. He knew his time would come soon. He smiled with ease, giving a thumbs up and saying, "That's all right, Captain." With everything set, Tsuna nodded in satisfaction. On the other hand, Haizaki clenched his fist and gritted his teeth in frustration. He couldn't help but turn toward the scoreboard, which displayed 27-19. Aware that Tsuna had tweaked the plan because he hadn't effectively subdued Kai's, Haizaki felt a mix of emotions. Initially, he was pleased that he managed to maintain momentum against Kai's, but it wasn't to the extent that Kai's couldn't fight back. It seemed below Tsuna's expectations of him. Though Haizaki felt good knowing Tsuna had high expectations, he was frustrated for not living up to them. The fact that Tsuna didn't reprimand him made him feel even worse. Agiwara observed Haizaki's reaction silently, cheering him on. "Let's go, buddy, I know you got this." Without much delay, both teams returned to the court as the second quarter was set to begin. The crowd, once again, started to buzz with excitement as the game was about to resume. In this quarter, Kaijo Hai embraced a newfound determination and will actively search for openings in Fukuda Sogo's defense while strengthening their own. As the ball found its way to Kasumatsu, he was dribbling it slowly. The court's atmosphere tensed as Tsuna approached, closing the distance. "What are you planning, Kazama?" Kasumatsu questioned. No matter how many times he mulled it over, he just couldn't wrap his head around it. Was Tsuna attempting to wear out Kai's? That seemed like the most logical conclusion at the moment. Although, it didn't align with Tsuna's usual play style, given that the guy often preferred showcasing dominance over his opponents. Tsuna just slightly raised his eyebrows and then offered a light smile in response, saying, "Well, why don't you take a guess? It wouldn't be fun if I handed you the answer, right? I thought you were a well-mannered freshman. It seems like I was wrong. You're one nasty bastard, Fukuda Sogo's captain." Kasumatsu frowned as he dribbled the ball slowly, his words tinged with frustration and a hint of anger. However, Tsuna just smiled as he suddenly executed a swift move, catching Kasumatsu off guard. Kasumatsu's eyes widened in surprise as Tsuna's maneuver was entirely different from his previous actions. Caught off balance, Kasumatsu attempted to react by stepping back, but it was too late. Tsuna deftly grazed the ball in his hand, causing it to slip away. Gritting his teeth, Kasumatsu helplessly watched as Tsuna snatched the ball. Anticipating Tsuna to charge forward, Kasumatsu was taken aback when Tsuna instead flicked his hand, sending the ball blurring across the court towards Nijimura, who was already advancing. "How did he get there so quickly?" Kasumatsu exclaimed in astonishment. It was a move entirely outside of Kasumatsu's expectations. "Shuzo is quite unpredictable sometimes, I hope you don't mind it." Tsuna spoke lightly, shifting Kasumatsu's attention to him. "I take back what I said. You're not just a nasty bastard. You're one nasty fucking bastard, Tsunayoshi Kazama." Kasumatsu spoke, his thoughts racing to figure out how to counter Fukuda Sogo's sudden change in pattern. He had gravely misjudged Fukuda Sogo's abilities as a captain. It wasn't just about his technical skills, the real challenge lay in his ability to manipulate his opponents, making him a tough adversary. Despite being a friendly person off the court, Fukuda Sogo's captain was simply vicious during the game. Tsuna just shook his head, turning to see Nijimura's figure returning to his position. He commented silently, "Not bad. Seems like he's getting better at reading my moves." Nijimura swiftly moved past his marked opponent when Tsuna subtly shifted his body weight to steal the ball from Kasumatsu, who was oblivious, thinking Tsuna would undoubtedly attempt a steal. While Nijimura knew Tsuna could navigate forward independently, he was also aware that if he positioned himself well, Tsuna would likely choose to pass the ball, given its efficiency. Tsuna smiled lightly as he looked at Kasumatsu and said, "You know, the first quarter was a bit dull. Why don't we pick up the pace a bit?" Kasumatsu silently clenched his fist as he scoffed and turned away. "I won't let you do whatever plan you have in mind," he silently vowed as he strode away. Chapter 205, Chapter 202, Bearing the Sweet Fruit of Persistence. As the game progressed and Fukuda Sogo's pace intensified, Kaijo found themselves increasingly overwhelmed by the mounting pressure, teetering on the verge of defensive collapse. The crowd also became more animated, mirroring the intensity of the match. "Looks like they've caught on, hey?" Midorima mumbled to himself, casting a glance at the unfolding game. However, with Kaijo now understanding the necessity of taking risks and creating openings beyond relying solely on Kais, they began making bold moves that simultaneously intensified the pressure on Fukuda Sogo's defense. Midorima had been perplexed before, wondering why Tsuna had initially centered the gameplay around the duel between Haizaki and Kais. Was he confident that Haizaki could completely suppress Kais? Midorima believed so, given that Haizaki hadn't succeeded in entirely suppressing Kais. It seemed the most logical explanation for Fukuda Sogo's abrupt shift in their attack pattern. Anyone would think the same, considering a slight advantage in the duel wouldn't satisfy a team of such caliber. Still, what if it's the other way around? Midorima adjusted his glasses with a grim expression. If that were the case, it meant Kais had improved significantly for Tsuna to utilize him in refining a player of Haizaki's caliber. Haizaki is already strong enough to take control the momentum against Kais. Does that mean there's more to it? However, having a better understanding of Tsuna than anyone, as he closely monitored Fukuda Sogo's captain's movements, Midorima was aware that Tsuna undoubtedly had a plan involving Haizaki. If Haizaki can truly surpass expectations, that means there would be 3 players in Fukuda Sogo, including Tsuna, who could contend with the generation of miracles. Even if it were only at a foundational level, the prospect was still daunting enough for such a team to emerge in the tournament. Despite the significant improvements made by the current generation of miracles, a player reaching such a level was impressive nonetheless. Absurd. Midorima sighed, unable to resist shifting his gaze toward where Rakuzan was situated. The only other team with such a formidable lineup, besides Fukuda Sogo, would be Rakuzan. They boasted 3 of the uncrowned kings in their team, and despite their defeat against Fukuda Sogo in the Inter-High, this setback was seen as a guarantee for improvement. Aware of the formidable opponents Shudoku would face, Midorima was far from discouraged. Instead, his gaze lit up with excitement within his pupils. Having identified his trigger to enter the zone, he had become more honest with himself about the thrill of facing strong opponents. On the court, Kaijo's risky plays had been mostly stopped by Fukuda Sogo's players. However, they remained persistent in their efforts. While Fukuda Sogo's players attempted to steer the play towards either Kasumatsu or Kaijo actively sought alternatives. This time, the ball found its way to Moriyama, who was being marked by Ishida. Moriyama, Kaijo's shooting guard, possessed a unique and challenging shooting style. Despite its difficulty to block, Moriyama considered his current situation to be an unfavorable matchup, especially against an agility-focused player like Ishida. Nevertheless, there are other options, he thought with a smirk as he surprised Ishida by passing the ball to Kai's without any apparent pressure from him. The move left Ishida perplexed. Why would Moriyama willingly pass the ball to Kai's in a seemingly pressure-free situation? Though he was perplexed, Ishida still tried to close the distance with Moriyama to continue marking Kaijo's shooting guard. However, he soon realized that Moriyama had effortlessly stepped back faster. It created more space between them, prompting him to exclaim as he saw the ball flying to Moriyama's hand, "Shit!" Moriyama smirked lightly at Ishida as Kai's passed the ball back to him. "Well, it looks like our persistence finally paid off, doesn't it?" He spoke, genuinely pleased that their efforts were bearing fruit after multiple failed attempts to break through. Observing Ishida's immediate reaction as he tried to close the distance between them, Moriyama smoothly transitioned into his unorthodox shooting motion. He swung the ball between his hands from below, deviating from the orthodox shot from above. The ball soared into the air with a high arc, its trajectory devoid of any visible motion, causing Ishida to grit his teeth, acknowledging that the shot was flawless. As expected, the ball swished smoothly through the basket. Despite Fukuda Sogo's immediate retaliation, Kaijo remained undeterred. Moriyama's breakthrough had created numerous possibilities for them. Building on Moriyama's success, Kobarai and Hayakawa finally connected the points, capitalizing on Moriyama's shot and securing the rebound in case he missed. On the side, Aguilera was pleasantly surprised to see Hayakawa's versatility, excelling not only in rebounding but also showcasing impressive speed. A slight smile appeared on Aguilera's face as he looked forward to the challenge posed by this strong opponent. With these developments, Kaijo successfully penetrated Fukuda Sogo's defense. The only tasks left were to fortify their own defense and slow down Fukuda Sogo's scoring pace, ensuring they could catch up in the game. Kaijo's coach had a plan in case they succeeded in breaking through, which they did. They employed Kobarai and Hayakawa to double-team anyone approaching their defensive area near their own basket. While it might not completely halt Fukuda Sogo's aggressive assault, it could at least apply the brakes, giving Kaijo's offense an opportunity to narrow the score gap. Kazumatsu's lips curved into a satisfied smile, seeing their strategy play out. This should be the turning point, he declared with confidence. Yet, when he shifted his focus to Tsuna, his words faltered, and his eyes widened with surprise. What? Anticipating a furrowed brow or signs of deep contemplation, Kasumatsu was taken aback. Instead, Tsuna's expression exuded absolute calmness, as if Kaijo's maneuvers had left no impact on him whatsoever. Staring into Tsuna's tranquil gaze felt like peering into the abyss, and Kasumatsu clenched his teeth, thinking, "Do you find this amusing? We're on the brink of seizing the momentum, and yet you treat it like a joke? What's going on in that head of yours, you rascal?" As Tsuna sensed Kazumatsu's intense gaze, he raised his eyebrows in surprise, piecing together the thoughts racing through Kazumatsu's mind. However, he simply shook his head lightly, choosing not to offer an explanation. From the beginning, he never underestimated Kaijo Hai. He had meticulously contemplated the best strategies to counter any moves they might make. It was akin to his approach to chess, where he would consider multiple possibilities. Even as it appeared that Kaijo was on the brink of turning the tables, it fell well within his expectations. Besides, if they couldn't manage that, it would be rather dull, wouldn't it? Tsuna's expression twisted into his signature smirk, a gesture Kasumatsu misinterpreted as mockery, further fueling his frustration. Yet, among the members of Fukuda Sogo, there was a collective understanding that it was time to shatter Kaijo's soaring aspirations. Chapter 206, Chapter 203, Shattering Their Hopes. The basketball court buzzed with energy as Fukuda Sogo went on the attack. Tsuna dribbled the ball with lightning speed, leaving Kasamatsu struggling to keep up. However, he was determined to stop Tsuna at all costs as Kasamatsu trailed Tsuna while gritting his teeth in an attempt to match his opponent's pace. From the sidelines, Kai's widened his eyes as he sensed trouble and shouted, "Captain! Don't fall for it!" Catching the wind of the warning, Kasamatsu widened his eyes in realization. But it was too late. In the blink of an eye, Tsuna shifted his weight, executing a sharp crossover to the right. Reacting on instinct, Kasamatsu committed to following Tsuna's lead. However, in a display of finesse, Tsuna abruptly stepped back, leaving Kasamatsu off balance and teetering on the edge of a fall. The crowd gasped in unison as Kasamatsu, unable to recover in time, found himself descending to the floor unceremoniously, landing on his backside. The gym fell silent for a split second. The only sounds were the echoes of the fallen captain's thud and the distant cheers of the crowd. Tsuna wasted no time. Like a streak of lightning, he darted past the fallen Kasamatsu, leaving him scrambling to regain his footing. Fuck! Kasamatsu's frustration boiled over as he sprinted to catch up with Tsuna, but hope flickered when Moriyama abandoned his defensive post to intercept. Grim etched on his face as Kasamatsu barked, "Damn it, Moriyama, on your back!" Before Moriyama could fully grasp the gravity of his mistake, Tsuna executed a lightning-quick move. With a flick of his wrist, the ball streaked across the court, landing seamlessly in Ishida's hands. Kasamatsu clenched his teeth, watching intently as Ishida skillfully navigated past Hayakawa's defense. With a deft leap sideways, he managed to evade Koburai's attempted follow-up defense. Just when it seemed like Fukuda Sogo had the upper hand, a familiar figure emerged from the sideline. With impeccable timing, Kai swooped in to salvage the situation. With a swift and graceful block, he sent the ball rebounding off the backboard and back onto the court, where Hayakawa effortlessly secured it. Koburai had already surged forward in response to Kai's arrival. Hayakawa swiftly passed the ball to him, initiating a counter-attack against Fukuda Sogo's relentless assault. Unfortunately, Koburai's offensive momentum came to an abrupt halt as he encountered the formidable presence of Nijimura, standing like an imposing wall in his path. All of a sudden, Nijimura surprised him with an unexpected chuckle. Koburai's frown deepened, and he couldn't help but ask, "What's so funny, man?" Nijimura, still amused, replied with a smile, "Ah, my bad. I was just thinking I've had enough warm-up." He relaxed his stance, took a deep breath, and exuded an unusual calmness that felt sharp and refined. Before Koburai could react, Nijimura's mood shifted, and he declared with determination, "Sorry, but I can't let you guys keep scoring from here on." His eyes focused on Koburai with a serene determination. Ready to argue back, Koburai suddenly felt a surge of pressure from Nijimura. Gritting his teeth, he found himself slowing down as Nijimura's defensive skills came into play. Darn it, is this the night perception he used against Murasakibara from Yasenhai? Koburai cursed silently. Just as Koburai geared up to forcefully push through the defense, a flicker of movement caught his attention from the corner of his eyes. His gaze gleamed with recognition as he spotted an opportunity. Reacting swiftly, he stepped back, diverting his focus from the hoop, and delivered a precise pass toward Moriyama. A triumphant smile played on Koburai's lips as he addressed Nijimura, "Well, I may not break through, but I'll let him do it for me." Nijimura burst into hearty laughter at Koburai's words, a reaction that seemed to irk the latter. "You find that amusing?" Koburai retorted with clear displeasure. However, Nijimura simply shook his head, chuckling, "Unfortunately for you, there was another beast waiting there." Koburai's eyes widened in shock at Nijimura's cryptic remark. Turning to follow Nijimura's gaze, he saw Moriyama positioned strategically. However, his surprise was mirrored in Moriyama's expression as Ishida, with his casual stance, seemed to have anticipated the play with remarkable precision. "Damn, he's in that kind of state too." Moriyama cursed under his breath, realizing that Ishida had tapped into his beast instinct as well. The revelation prompted a sense of urgency, knowing that Fukuda Sogo now had multiple players operating at their peak. Meanwhile, Hayakawa found himself isolated in the defensive zone. And Kasamatsu, also reacting with frantic determination, abruptly turned around to pursue Ishida. The rest of the Kaijo High mirrored his urgency, desperately trying to thwart Fukuda Sogo's relentless scoring spree and turn the tide of the game. Amidst the chaos, Tsuna observed the unfolding events silently with a slight shake of his head. Kai's raced to provide backup. However, even with his speed, Kai's barely made it in time. Showcasing remarkable agility, Ishida broke through Hayakawa's defense effortlessly. As he moved toward the basket, Ishida felt Kai's presence, but he remained unfazed, recognizing another figure emerging alongside Kai's. Kazumatsu's eyes widened in surprise as he silently exclaimed, "He's fast." It was Agiwara who made a sudden entrance. Initially, Haizaki hesitated when he saw Agiwara swiftly moving forward with agility. It was a clear signal that Agiwara wanted him to give him this opportunity. Despite Haizaki's initial eagerness to take on Kai's, he conceded, muttering, "Fine, just this once, Agiwara." With that, Haizaki eased up on his stance, keeping a close eye on how things played out on the court. Nearing the basket, Ishida made a leap for it. Kai's also followed suit as his determination fueled him. "Like I'd let you." Ishida responded calmly, "I know." Instead of taking a straightforward shot, Ishida surprised everyone by moving the ball behind his back before passing it to Agiwara. Caught off guard by the unexpected move, Kai's could only watch as Agiwara effortlessly caught the ball and went for a layup. The ball gently bounced off the backboard before smoothly going through the basket, scoring a crucial point for Fukuda Sogo. Kaijo's coach was taken aback by the turn of events. He stood up in disbelief and hurriedly called for a timeout. Kazumatsu's face twisted in frustration as he glared at Tsuna's laid-back expression. In the end, we're nothing more than puppets in his twisted game. A bitter understanding hit him hard. They were never really free from Tsuna's control, just dancing around for his own entertainment. It made Kazumatsu feel even worse. Chapter 207, Chapter 204, We're on a different level. Amin sighed and shook his head as he observed Kaijo's players. He felt a sense of pity for them, realizing they genuinely believed in turning things around, only to be silenced by Fukuda Sogo. Amin then looked at Tsuna on the court, who calmly watched everything unfold. He expressed his disdain, muttering, "What a terrible person you are, Tsuna." I find that attractive, though." Momwa chimed in, her eyes sparkling as she looked at Tsuna. She thought Tsuna looked very attractive at that moment. Amin frowned at Momwa's comment. "Are you actually serious right now?" Seeing Momwa's genuine admiration, Amin sighed once more, muttering, "You both are just terrible." Back on the court, a timeout was called immediately after Kaijo's coach requested it. This is quite tricky." Takuchi wore a thoughtful expression as he pondered possible strategies. Kazumatsu was on the same page, glancing at the scoreboard, which displayed a daunting 43-28 with Fukuda Sogo in a significant lead. "We have to do something about this," he thought silently. They needed a catalyst to break through and create an opening. "Coach, can I try something?" A voice cut through the tense atmosphere on Kaijo Hi's bench, prompting everyone to turn toward Kai's, who raised his hand like an eager student. Takuchi frowned as he asked, "What are you trying to do?" "I don't know." "Hey!" Kazumatsu smacked Kai's on the head, eliciting a groan of pain from him as Kai's rolled his eyes in annoyance. Frustrated, Kai's grumbled, "What the hell is wrong with you? Explain properly, you dumbass." "Like I said, I don't know." Kai's scratched his head annoyedly. However, he then stood up, locking eyes with everyone as he spoke with a cheeky smile, "I may not know, but I'll give it my best shot. Just trust me on this, guys. After all, aren't I your ace?" Kazumatsu forcefully suppressed the urge to smack Kai's head once again. Moriyama and Koburai shook their heads at Kai's confidence, wearing slight smiles. Meanwhile, Hayakawa chimed in, "Whoa! I see, as expected of you, Kai's. I will also try my best." His excited shout prompted Kazumatsu to smack him on the head to silence him. Takuchi sighed, shaking his head in slight amusement at the scene before turning to Kai's, "Sure, then. Let's channel our attack through Kai's." Everyone nodded solemnly, while Kai's smiled and reciprocated with a nod, saying, "Thank you for your trust. I promise I will not disappoint you." Meanwhile, on Fukuda Sogo's bench, everyone shook their heads upon hearing the ruckus from Kaijo. Despite being just one player, the noise was surprisingly loud. "They seem to be a lively bunch, hey?" Tsuna muttered with a light shake of his head. He then turned to everyone, adding, "Well, there won't be any changes to our strategy this time. Just focus on doing what you're supposed to do." His words were met with nods, and a gleam of excitement lit up their pupils. Not long after the timeout ended, the game resumed, and Fukuda Sogo thoroughly seized the momentum. They aggressively continued their onslaught, leaving Kaijo High gritting their teeth as they could only watch the score difference widen. "Today's your losing day, Ryota." Hizaki's mocking tone trailed behind Kai's as he tracked his movements. Despite the taunting, Kai's remained unfazed. He swiftly maneuvered to the side, evading Hizaki's defense, and surged towards the basket with lightning speed. His leap to slam the ball down seemed imminent. "Ha! You're done for, you fool!" Hizaki's triumphant declaration echoed. Yet, just as Kai's was about to make his move, Hizaki materialized in the nick of time. With a precise block, he thwarted Kai's dunk attempt, causing the ball to ricochet off the backboard. Agiwara reacted swiftly, catching the rebound. In a synchronized burst, Agiwara relayed the ball to Tsuna. Fukuda Sogo surged forward in unison, leaving Kaijo momentarily flustered by the sudden shift in momentum. Tsuna effortlessly flicked the ball, and it raced across the court, finding its way into Hizaki's waiting hand, closely trailed by Kai's. Dribbling the ball with a certain swagger, Hizaki cast a condescending gaze down at Kai's. Despite the precarious situation of Kaijo, Kai's persisted. Hizaki couldn't resist needling him, saying, "Why not throw in the towel, Ryota? It's almost pitiful watching you fail repeatedly. Damn it, I swear to go I'll fucking smack that fucker in the face." Kazumatsu's muttered curse echoed through the court in response to Hizaki's taunts. Yet, Kai's remained unyielding, unfazed by the direct jabs at his effort. Hizaki shook his head, silently acknowledging, "I'll take that move, Ryota." Despite Kai's persistent defense, Hizaki wore a smirk. Suddenly changing his pace, he executed the same move Kai's had used seconds earlier, effortlessly breaking through Kai's defense. With a burst of speed, Hizaki leaped, slamming the ball into the basket. Helpless, Kai's could only watch as Hizaki gracefully landed. Glancing at the scoreboard, now displaying 52-34, revealed a considerable gap in the scores. As the second quarter neared its end, Kaijo had managed to score only 4 additional points since the timeout. Observing Kai's gaze on the scoreboard, Hizaki scoffed, strolling back while taunting, "Give it up, Ryota. Can't you see how useless your efforts are? I'm on a whole different level. Wake up and quit, you idiot." "That guy," Kasumatsu grumbled in frustration as he retrieved the ball from behind the baseline. Passing it to Kai's, he noticed a furrow in Kai's eyebrows, uncertain of what was going on. Yet, his concern seemed unnecessary as Kai's expression oddly very composed. "You know, Shogo," Kai's said, slowly advancing with the ball, drawing Hizaki's attention with a furrowed brow. "Seems like you're not ready to give up." Kai's chuckled, deepening Hizaki's frown. He sighed, then smiled, "To think that we have something to agree on, so weird." "What?" "Shogo, I agree with you." Kai's expression shifted, and Hizaki felt a subtle alarm. Kai's pupils gleamed oddly as he declared, "We're simply not on the same level." "Hey!" In a sudden pause that rippled through the court, Kai's expertly adjusted his body weight, and with a swift flick of his hand, the ball blurred through the air. "You're way below me, Shogo," Kai's calmly declared as the ball found its precise path toward Moriyama. Despite Kai's audacious words that would undoubtedly enrage him, Hizaki's focus shifted to something else. The move Kai's had just pulled was eerily familiar, a technique known to Fukuda Sogo players. Hizaki widened his eyes in disbelief, exclaiming, "What the heck?" On the other hand, Kasumatsu, initially taken aback, regained his composure. A light smile graced his face as he observed Kai's back, silently acknowledging, "We do need a catalyst to turn this around, and our ace is perfectly suited for the role." With his perfect copy. Chapter 208, Chapter 205, Momentum Reclaimed. That pass unmistakably belonged to Tsuna. Hizaki stared at Kai's, who was visibly wincing in pain after executing that pass. Disbelief edged across Hizaki's face. Meanwhile, Moriyama found himself fumbling for the ball. The sheer force and unexpected strength of the pass caught him off guard, leaving him struggling to secure it. The discomfort from receiving the forceful pass acted as a jolting return to reality for Moriyama. While others on the court still seemed to be in shock, Moriyama had snapped back faster. "Damn it, even if I were ready for the pass, I doubt I could have handled it properly. How on earth do Fukuda Sogo players manage to receive such passes?" Moriyama pondered, immediately moving toward the ball that had slipped from his grasp. He managed to secure it, regaining control, and swiftly transitioned into his shooting motion. This turn of events left the Fukuda Sogo players, especially Ishida, who was tasked with marking Moriyama. Ishida found himself in a blank state of mind, struggling to comprehend the rapid turn of events. However, he quickly snapped back to reality, attempting to intervene and stop Moriyama's progress. Unfortunately, Ishida's efforts were in vain, as Moriyama had already initiated his shooting motion. The ball soared through the air, following a perfect trajectory, and smoothly swished through the basket. "Did you guys just see that?" Takao blurted out, his disbelief echoed by the rest of the Shudoku players, their eyes fixed on the astonishing events unfolding on the court. "He's copying Tsuna's moves now." A bead of sweat traced a path down Midorima's face as he readjusted his glasses, his mind racing. Yet, beneath the surface, Midorima couldn't shake the instinctive feeling that Kai's had somehow gained the ability to replicate the skills of the generation of miracles. Instantly mimicking someone's moves after a single glance is already unfair, but copying a player of that caliber. Hyaga's face twisted in disbelief, his back slick with cold sweat as he watched the unfolding spectacle. The sentiment of awe was palpable among the Siren team. Kagami's lips curled into a wry smile as he observed Kai's figure on the court, thinking, he's reaching a whole new level of absurdity. On the opposing side, Amin let out a low chuckle while Momoa nervously eyed the situation, her concern clearly directed at Tsuna. "Looks like Kai's got a formidable trick up his sleeve." Amin's grin widened as he turned his attention to Tsuna's composed figure, pondering, but will that be enough to drag the main boss into the ring? Momoa's anxiety ebbed away as she saw Tsuna maintaining his usual composure amidst the chaos. As the Kaijo High players were on the verge of celebrating, a sudden twist in the game unfolded. The ball blurred through the court, swiftly returning to Hizaki's possession, leaving everyone with a palpable sense of helplessness. Kai's eyes flicked towards Tsuna, maintaining a calm demeanor on the opposite side of the court. Tsuna had effortlessly executed the elusive pass, almost as if taunting Kai's. Closing in on Hizaki, who was now warily dribbling the ball, Kai's could still feel a lingering stiffness in his whole arm from copying Tsuna's elusive pass. "Guess I can't just recklessly copy Kazamiki's pass," Kai's pondered, taking a moment to inhale deeply. Simultaneously, Hizaki grappled with a complex mix of emotions bubbling within him. As he maneuvered around the court with Kai's shadowing his every move, a realization struck him: he could actually copy Captain's move. Frustration edged itself deeper across Hizaki's face, an involuntary reaction to the unexpected turn of events. "Kai's would eventually take your place, it would be better if you quits now." His irritation intensified, a torrent of Akashi's words flooding his mind, causing him to clench his teeth. Stealing anyone's move was within his repertoire, but stealing someone of that caliber was impossible. Yet Kai's was effortlessly doing what Hizaki believed was beyond his reach. Unacceptable. Studying Kai's figure before him, Hizaki's gaze sharpened, and a chill ran down his spine. The gleam beneath Kai's pupils felt suffocating, an unsettling realization settling in. "Damn it! I was beneath you? You've got to be kidding me, Ryota!" Hizaki bellowed angrily, a surge of frustration propelling him into action. He abruptly crossed to the right, Kai's following suit, only for Hizaki to pivot sharply to the left, breaking past Kai's defense. The air crackled with Hizaki's defiance, a desperate attempt to shatter the suffocating sense of inadequacy that threatened to consume him. As Hizaki neared the basket, his face contorted in a twisted smile, a manifestation of both frustration and anger. He laughed out loud, "Ha ha ha, I told you, you're just trash." His triumph, however, was short-lived. A looming presence abruptly descended from the side the moment he leaped for the basket. The pressure crashing down on his body felt hauntingly familiar, and Hizaki widened his eyes in disbelief, muttering, "Murasakibara." Yet, Murasakibara wasn't even on the court. Struggling to quench the frustration welling up inside him, Hizaki could only succumb to the harsh reality. The looming presence he felt wasn't Murasakibara. It was Kai's. "Wah!" Words stuck in his throat as Hizaki helplessly watched Kai's effortlessly thwart his attempt. Kai's had copied Murasakibara's defensive form, and the ball was forcefully swatted from Hizaki's hand. The cruel realization hit him with full force, adding a layer of despair to the already boiling frustration within. Surprise swept through everyone on the court, and the excitement in the gymnasium reached a fever pitch. The crowd reveled in the intense game unfolding before them. They assumed Kai's would simply copy Tsuna's moves only, just like he did with Aomine in the Inter-High. However, this time, they were dead wrong. Beside Tsuna's move, they had a hunch that the current Kai's had the whole generation of Miracle's iconic moves under his sleeve. Kasumatsu couldn't contain his chuckle, a peculiar sense of happiness washing over him. He snatched the ball and passed it back to Kai's, who swiftly positioned himself for a pass. Go Rec M, ace. Hizaki's frustration peaked as he grasped the reality that Kai's had completely dominated their duel. Kai's will eventually take your place, and it would be better if you quit now. What irked him most was Akashi's words, echoing louder and louder in his head. Filled with anger, Hizaki shouted, "Shut the heck up!" Without wasting a moment, he sprinted after Kai's, who had the ball, determined to thwart any advance. Unbeknownst to Hizaki, Kai's had no intention of moving forward. In a sudden shooting motion that everyone recognized, Kai's caught Hizaki off guard, prompting him to grit his teeth and accelerate. Regrettably, it was too little, too late. Kai's leaped and released the ball in a beautiful, high arc from the center of the court. The ball sailed through the basket with flawless precision. Witnessing this moment triggered an overwhelming flood of Akashi's words in Hizaki's mind, plunging him into a deep sense of despair. Chapter 209, Chapter 206, You're my best friend. Whoa! What on earth? Isn't that Midorima's three-pointer? Wow, Kai's Ryota from Kaijo High is an unbelievable player. Let's go, Kaijo! As they witnessed Kai's remarkable feat, the crowd erupted in exclamations and whispers. Their excitement escalated as the game unfolded with even greater intensity than they had anticipated. Even Midorima's three-pointer as well, hey! Nijimura muttered tensely, beads of sweat rolling down his face as he observed Kai's, who didn't even watch the ball, immediately turning, just like Midorima always did. Right after Kai's made the three-pointer, the second quarter ended with Fukuda Sogo still in the lead at 52-40. Despite this, the mental state of Kaijo High players was at an all-time high, given what Kai's had just pulled off. Their expressions brightened with this unexpected turn of events, a newfound confidence coursing through their veins. The belief that they could still turn the game around and emerge victorious filled the air. A stark contrast in expressions painted Fukuda Sogo's players as they gazed grimly at Kai's figure. With the 30-minute break between halves, they slowly made their way off the court. Despite their outwardly grim appearance, their mental resilience remained unshaken. As they headed toward the bench to collect their belongings before heading to the changing room, they noticed Hizaki standing still with a dark expression. Confusion swept through the team as they exchanged glances, wondering about the sudden change in Hizaki's demeanor. Agiwara couldn't help but frown. He approached Hizaki, calling, "Hizaki? Hey, buddy, we gotta leave." Hizaki didn't respond, lost in his thoughts until he was jolted back to reality by Agiwara tapping his shoulder. Oh, right." Hizaki responded absent-mindedly, prompting Agiwara to look at him with a concerned expression. Something was clearly amiss with Hizaki, and as his best friend, Agiwara felt an urge to do something. However, he found himself at a loss, unaware of the specific problem Hizaki was grappling with. Is it because of Ryota Kai's? Agiwara couldn't help but wonder if that was the case, considering Hizaki had some unresolved issues with the guy. As Hizaki began walking out of the court following the others, Agiwara walked alongside, stealing glances at Hizaki's darkened expression. As they entered the changing room, Hizaki walked in, and Agiwara followed closely behind. However, Agiwara was halted by a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Nijimura gesturing for him to come closer, whispering something urgently. Upon hearing Nijimura's words, Agiwara's eyes widened in surprise, and concern edged his features. Despite this, he nodded determinedly in response. Alexandra was conspicuously absent, and Tsuna assumed she was enjoying the activities around the gymnasium, given the numerous stalls and people selling various items. Glancing at his team, Tsuna chuckled softly. Despite the seemingly unfavorable situation, their eyes gleamed with an even fiercer light, radiating heightened excitement. However, Hizaki was in a completely different mental state, utterly crushed by Kai's. The atmosphere around him conveyed a palpable sense of despair. Tsuna shook his head lightly before speaking, "Well, we won't change any of our strategy for now. I'm sure you wanted this too, a taste of facing a formidable opponent, right?" Nods rippled through the team, and smiles broke across their faces, bringing a sense of satisfaction to Tsuna. "All right then, we have a long break ahead. Feel free to do whatever you want around the gymnasium. Just make sure to return 10 minutes before we head back to the court. Meet here in this room. As Tsuna continued, the room filled with the sounds of scattered chatter among the team. Should we go grab some drinks? Sure, I'm sure there should be a vending machine around. The team exchanged casual banter before deciding to leave the room. Just as Agiwara was about to exit, he cast a glance at Haizaki, who remained lost in his thoughts. Agiwara shook his head before asking, "Are you going to give up now?" The chattering abruptly ceased as everyone turned, their expressions shifting to surprise. Stopping in their tracks, they couldn't help but watch the unfolding scene in front of them as attention hanging in the air. "What did you say?" Haizaki opened his mouth, his words carrying a threatening tone. However, Agiwara remained unfazed, sighing with a seemingly disappointed expression that only fueled Haizaki's growing anger. "I saw Kai's crushing you so badly, so I wonder if you wanted to give up." Agiwara's words, essentially rubbing salt in Haizaki's fresh wound, made him snap. Haizaki propelled himself forward, grabbing Agiwara by the collar, his gaze ablaze with anger. Before he could act on his rage, a powerful punch landed on his face, sending him crashing into the locker before tumbling onto the ground. Staring up at the culprit, Haizaki spat in anger, "Nijimura, you motherfucker! What the hell do you think you're playing at? No violence is allowed in front of our captain," Nijimura said calmly as if he hadn't just broken his own rule. "Real hypocrite, aren't you?" Haizaki leaped to his feet, launching an assault on Nijimura. Nijimura shook his head slightly, effortlessly evading the punch directed at his face before countering with a swift kick that sent Haizaki crashing back to the ground. If Haizaki had been in his right state of mind, he wouldn't typically retaliate, fully aware that he stood no chance against Nijimura since their middle school days. Much less now, with Nijimura having acquired proper martial arts skills under Saba's. It seemed as if Haizaki was courting his own demise. However, consumed by frustration and teetering on the brink of emotional breakdown, he kept pulling himself up, engaging in a futile fight, only to be repeatedly beaten black and blue. After a relentless struggle, Haizaki reached a point where he could no longer fight back. He lay helplessly on the ground, the others watching the distressing spectacle wincing in pain and shaking their heads at the gruesome scene. Agiwara approached Haizaki, who sharply turned toward him with the wariness of a cornered beast. Agiwara released a sigh, his words carrying the weight of their shared history, "We've been through a lot, Haizaki. I've seen how hard you've worked to improve. Besides our captain and vice-captain, you're the toughest person I know." Haizaki's expression remained unchanged, but he listened as Agiwara pressed on, "Plus, losing to Kai's was just a little bump in the road." These words stirred a boiling anger within Haizaki's heart. He didn't see losing to Kai's as a minor setback, and he didn't care if it objectively was. It was a matter of his pride. Haizaki wanted to prove Akashi wrong, but the harsh reality seemed to crush that aspiration. "We went through tougher times back in the States. This much was nothing. I know you probably never thought of me as a friend, but to me, you're my best friend, Haizaki. If you just quit now after all that, it would be disappointing." Hearing these words caused Haizaki's body to flinch involuntarily. However, Agiwara didn't witness this as he left the room. The others followed suit, unable to bear witnessing any more of Haizaki's pitiful state. Chapter 210, Chapter 207, Resigned Resolve. Even though Agiwara's words prompted Haizaki to reflect on what had transpired, they did little to diminish his seething anger. Frustration welled up within him, and he couldn't resist slamming the floor with his hand in a burst of raw emotion. Just as he was about to unleash a barrage of curses, the atmosphere around him grew eerily quiet. The stifling silence was broken only by the deliberate steps slowly approaching him. Turning toward the figure approaching, he looked up, only to feel as if he were plunged into the depths of the sea, slowly being drowned by the icy gaze that made him feel utterly insignificant. Tsuna loomed over Haizaki, his gaze piercing through. In that suffocating silence, he asked, "Do you want to quit now, Shogo?" "What? Didn't I make it clear since the beginning, you're free to leave?" Tsuna's words silenced Haizaki. A complicated wave of emotions surged within Haizaki. Compared to Akashi, who had outright expelled him, Tsuna's words cut deeper than he had anticipated. However, Tsuna wasn't finished. He shook his head disappointed. For reasons unbeknownst to Haizaki, a strange feeling of guilt crept in as he witnessed that disappointment directed at him. Tsuna then left the room, saying, "Well, if you didn't want to leave, that's fine. Do understand that this team doesn't belong to those who were weak. These words plunged Haizaki into silence once again. A tumultuous storm of questions battered Haizaki's mind. Why did he choose to remain when Tsuna had explicitly granted him the freedom to depart? What propelled him to push himself, to compete against Agiwara when he saw Agiwara's unwavering dedication in training? Why did he persist in pushing his limits time and again? What fueled his relentless pursuit to prove himself superior among the teammates who trained alongside him? His initial goal, to defy Akashi by besting Kai's, had crumbled. His defeat meant the failure of that objective. With his aim shattered, there seemed to be no reason left to stay. Yet, despite this realization, he found himself immobilized, unable to move to depart the room and leave the team entirely. Why? The unanswered questions gnawed at his core. Haizaki found himself unable to comprehend his own actions. Forcefully sitting down, he leaned his back against the locker and sighed in defeat. At that moment, at least one truth became painfully clear to him: he's better than me. His face contorted with a mixture of anger, frustration, and sadness as he grappled with this reality. No matter how much he resisted admitting it, those elusive moves were beyond his ability to steal. He gazed up at the ceiling, his expression twisted with unsightly emotions. Strangely, the irksome voice of Akashi had disappeared, replaced by an even stronger surge of anger directed inward. An anger that bore down on him, fueled by the bitter realization of his own weakness. Fuck! Clenching his fist, he unleashed a guttural shout that echoed through the room, a desperate expression of the frustration that consumed him. Outside the changing room, Tsuna couldn't help but break into his trademark smirk upon hearing the muffled shout emanating from within. Nijimura, faithfully at his side, shook his head at the scene, letting out a sigh. Meanwhile, Agiwara cast a concerned glance towards their changing room, feeling a wave of relief wash over him at the sight of Tsuna's smirk. A slight shiver ran down his spine, but his worry for Haizaki had dissipated. Tsuna turned to Agiwara, still wearing his smile as he gave the guy a pat on the shoulder. Well, that was very well said, Shigehiro. He had instructed Nijimura to prompt Agiwara to provoke Haizaki a bit. Making Haizaki erupt in anger was the goal, and Agiwara had managed to exceed expectations, leaving Tsuna impressed with the impact it had on Haizaki. Nijimura chuckled, offering a thumbs up to Agiwara. You're my best friend, Haizaki. Tsuna couldn't help but chuckle, causing Agiwara to scratch his head awkwardly. Don't tease me, Vice Captain. Ha ha ha, teasing? I was just admiring you. Nijimura laughed heartily, giving Agiwara a hearty pat on the back that made him wince in pain. Agiwara held back, helplessly letting Nijimura do as he pleased. Well, let's grab some drinks. I'll treat you both for what you did earlier, Tsuna said, strolling through the corridor. Nijimura and Agiwara smiled, following him along the way. Shortly afterwards, everyone returned to the changing room and couldn't help but cast their gaze toward Haizaki. Not long ago, he had been thoroughly beaten, black and blue, yet now he sat calmly, surprising everyone. They weren't privy to what transpired with Haizaki after they left, but there was an undeniable change in him. What happened to him? Ishida pulled Agiwara aside, questioning him. Mochizuki joined the conversation, curious about the unfolding events. I'm not sure. What? Are you messing with us? Agiwara awkwardly scratched his head, genuinely unaware of what had happened to Haizaki. He was indeed concerned, but he had simply followed orders from earlier. Nevertheless, he felt a sense of relief seeing the current Haizaki, who typically showed little interest in anything other than Kai's and Akashi, often expressing anger. This calm demeanor was a stark contrast to Haizaki's usual self. Tsuna strolled in, eyeing the trio huddled together with a deadpan expression. They nervously chuckled, breaking their gaze before finally taking their seats. Despite their attempts to act normal, they couldn't resist stealing occasional glances at Haizaki. Feeling the weight of their scrutiny, Haizaki clenched his fist, suppressing his irritation at being observed like some rare specimen. I wish I could smack their heads once. However, the thought of Nijimura seizing that moment to pummel him again made him sigh. Fucking bastard, he probably had a blast beating me up, he muttered under his breath, casting a sidelong glance at Nijimura, who stood beside Tsuna. His body still throbbed with pain, the aftermath of the beating. A typical person would be wincing at every move, but Haizaki, though in the same pain, didn't even flinch. Tsuna observed Haizaki's gaze, noting a distinct change from the usual frustration and despair. Satisfied, he nodded. Haizaki caught Tsuna's gaze, and this time, instead of flinching as he typically would, he maintained eye contact. A fierce determination blazed in his pupils, prompting a smile of amusement from Tsuna. Without saying a word to Haizaki, Tsuna turned to the team and addressed them, "Once again, we won't be altering our strategy for now. Grab your gear, and let's head out to the court." Chapter 211, Chapter 208, Down the Stairs I Fell. Hey guys, I just fell off my bike a few hours ago. My overall body's okay, but my left foot joint got a bit banged up. I swung by the hospital just to be safe. Everything seems fine. Still feeling a lot of pain, though, so I'm thinking about heading back to the hospital just to double check today. Dash. As the break time concluded, the audience erupted into shouts and cheers, and their excitement rekindled, casting a vibrant atmosphere over the court. Both teams made their way back onto the playing area, ready for the next phase of the game. Kaijo Hai headed to their bench, taking a moment to organize their gear before re-entering the court. During this brief interlude, Kazumatsu's expression bore a solemn demeanor as he observed Fukuda Sogo's players. They didn't seem to waver in the slightest, such confidence. Very admirable, indeed, he thought, acknowledging the resilience of Fukuda Sogo's team. Despite Kaijo gaining momentum, it appeared that the opposing team's mindset remained steadfast. While there was an air of frustration around one player, Kazumatsu noted with surprise that Haizaki now seemed composed. However, a lingering question occupied Kazumatsu's thoughts. Why does he look like he just got beaten? Haizaki's appearance told a clear story. His face bore bruises, and dried blood marked some areas, leaving no doubt that he had taken a severe beating. The referee, noticing Haizaki's condition, approached him with concern. "Hey! Did you get involved in violence? If so, I need you to tell me what happened." "I don't know what you're talking about," Haizaki replied casually as if everything was normal. Still unconvinced by Haizaki's nonchalant response, the referee furrowed his brow and fixed a sharp gaze on him. Lying to the referee would be considered an offense. "I need you to be aware of this, student." Haizaki, seemingly unfazed by the threat, maintained his calm demeanor. "Like I said, I don't know what you're talking about." Despite the referee's attempt at a threatening tone, Haizaki remained unyielding in his response. "Please don't joke around. How do you explain your appearance, then? Violence is strictly forbidden." Haizaki turned toward the referee, his gaze intensifying with a seriousness that sent a shiver down the referee's spine. It was evident that Haizaki was no ordinary individual. "I fell down the stairs." The seemingly straightforward explanation hung in the air, leaving a momentary pause as those present processed the unexpected statement. "Hey!" It took quite a while for the referee to fully process what Haizaki had just told him. Veins bulged out of his temple, and he was on the verge of lashing out in disbelief. "He said it clearly, didn't he?" Just as the referee was about to vent his frustration, Tsuna approached. The aura surrounding Tsuna, however, caught the referee off guard. He felt as if he were standing in front of his own superior, and this unexpected presence quenched his urge to lash out, replacing it with a frown. Tsuna was unfazed as he patted Haizaki on the shoulder while addressing the referee. "Shogo here can be quite clumsy sometimes. That's why when he said he fell down the stairs. He fell down the stairs." As Tsuna delivered the final line, his tone dropped to a near whisper. The referee, involuntarily gulping down saliva, felt the weight of Tsuna's words was akin to a decree. The onlookers couldn't help but shake their heads at the unfolding scene. Even Kazumatsu found himself frowning, entertaining a momentarily absurd thought: did he beat up Haizaki? Quickly dismissing the idea, Kazumatsu shook his head. Tsuna didn't strike him as the violent type. Still, the evidence of Haizaki having been involved in a physical altercation was undeniable. If it's not him, then... Kazumatsu's gaze scanned the Fukuda Sogo players, who were somberly observing the interaction. His gaze halted on Najimura's figure, standing with complete nonchalance. The way he carried himself signaled an unwavering trust in Tsuna to navigate and resolve the unfolding situation. Probably that guy. Kazumatsu mused, a frown deepening on his face. Nijimura was the type of person who treated Tsuna's words like gospel, indicating that it was Tsuna who had given the order. "I guess I should reconsider my opinion on Fukuda Sogo's captain." This realization prompted Kazumatsu to reassess his views on Fukuda Sogo's captain. However, a certainty settled in. He's a dangerous individual. The conclusion echoed in Kazumatsu's thoughts, casting a shadow over his understanding of the Fukuda Sogo captain. However, after a moment of consideration, the referee shook his head lightly. Whatever, you better watch yourselves, students. Violence is strictly forbidden. I'll let this slide as you didn't want to complicate things, which I understand. The referee sighed as he spoke. Still, he turned his gaze toward Tsuna, adopting a stern voice. But if we ever find out you were actually committing violence, we will have no choice but to ban your team going forward. The referee's warning hung in the air. I see. Thank you for your understanding. Tsuna was taken aback before he responded with a smile, his tone now amicable compared to the previous ones. The referee, once again let out a sigh as he walked away. Tsuna and Haizaki silently observed the referee's departure. Tsuna then chuckled suddenly, breaking the silence. He's a good referee. Hey? What do you mean? Forget about it. Let's focus on the game. Tsuna spoke as he walked away. While the referee might have been intimidated by Tsuna, his willingness to enforce the rules and issue a stern warning showcased his commitment to his responsibilities as a referee. And that alone had gained Tsuna's respect for him. As the referee gestured for both teams to gather and position themselves for the next half, he stole a glance at Tsuna. The aura emanating from the teenager was undeniably abnormal. Although he was uncertain of Tsuna's true identity, one thing was clear as the referee's thoughts swirled: he's one scary kid. As the game pressed on, the ball found its way into Kai's skilled hands. With Haizaki now marking him, Kai took slow, deliberate dribbles. Looking at Haizaki's composed demeanor, Kai felt a twinge of disbelief. It was a stark contrast to the Haizaki, who would usually take his time mocking and provoking him. Shaking his head slightly, Kai mused, I kinda miss his curses, though. On the other hand, Haizaki was fully focused on shadowing every move Kai made. Despite losing the earlier duel, it no longer bothered Haizaki. As Tsuna had once told him, the team didn't belong to those who were weak. Letting his circumstances get the best of him and getting upset over some small things when he had been through worse was a sign of weakness, and Haizaki couldn't afford to do that at the moment. He had already bared his vulnerability, exposing his weak side to others, and any further embarrassment was something he refused to tolerate. It didn't sit well with his pride. Observing Haizaki's resolute gaze, Kai was alarmed. The intensity in Haizaki's eyes left him taken aback, prompting him to wonder, just what the hell happened to him. Chapter 212, Chapter 209, BFF Chronicles. Well, that was surprising, but I still have a job to do. Kai's sudden change of pace caught everyone off guard. The court seemed to shrink as he unleashed a burst of speed, leaving Haizaki struggling to keep up. In a split second, Kai executed a sharp crossover to the right, mimicking the finesse of Amin's signature move. Haizaki didn't back down, even though he knew he couldn't catch up. He kept chasing after Kai, hustling to cover the ground. Kai's advance slowed down when Nijimura moved in quickly, shadowing him as he jumped for the basket. At that moment, Nijimura leaped as he extended his hand with the intent to block the shot. Yet, Kai, displaying the finesse of Amin, surprised everyone with a masterful maneuver. He smoothly retracted the ball, slinging it from behind his back in a formless shot that left the defenders and spectators alike in awe. In that pivotal moment, Nijimura's eyes widened in disbelief. Ah, shit! However, it was too late. The ball had already swished through the net with a satisfying sound, leaving the arena in a collective gasp. The referee's whistle pierced the tension, signaling a foul and granting Kai the opportunity for a free throw. Whoa! Now he used Amin's movement and formless shot. Holy crap! Kai from Kaijo High is actually so good. Of course, you dummy, he's one of the generation of miracles. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. The excitement reverberated throughout the gymnasium as spectators acknowledged Kai's impressive move. Copying our moves is no simple task, Midorima murmured to himself, recognizing the considerable effort required by Kai and the toll it would likely take on his stamina. However, as his gaze lingered on Tsuna, a frown creased Midorima's face. He's not one to let things unfold without interference. Puzzled by Tsuna's decision not to change their strategy, especially after witnessing Haizaki's remarkable transformation, Midorima couldn't reconcile it with Fukuda Sogo's unaltered approach. Hold on, Midorima adjusted his glasses, wiping sweat from his brow. His thoughts raced. Tsuna doesn't let opponents call the shots, but he might let it be if there's a goal he hasn't hit yet. Midorima wasn't sure, but he closely watched the game, trying to figure out Suna's plan. As the game continued, Kai's almost broke Fukuda Sogo's defense. Even on defense, he was a tough opponent by copying Murasakibara's moves. Haizaki, once again unable to stop Kai's, gritted his teeth in determination. Instead of getting frustrated and giving in to despair, he closely shadowed Kai's every move, determined to block his attempts. In his usual self, Haizaki would have felt frustrated and defeated. But this time, something had changed. Rather than feeling hopeless, he was fueled by determination. Unbeknownst to him, his mindset had undergone a significant transformation. Meanwhile, Kai sported a light smirk as he suddenly accelerated the pace of his dribbling, leaving Haizaki struggling to keep up with the ball. Attempting to halt Kai's advance, Haizaki found himself in a state of confusion. Kai's sharp crossover left Haizaki off balance, and he could only watch as Kai's figure seemingly grew taller, causing him to stumble. Everyone in Fukuda Sogo and the crowd reacted with surprise. The spectators, already captivated, now became even more fervent as they witnessed Kai's remarkable performance. Fuck! Even captain's ankle break. Haizaki cursed his inability to stop Kai's. Helplessly, he observed Kai seamlessly transition into his shooting motion. With a high arc, the ball soared through the air. Without even bothering to look at his shot, Kai's turned around. The ball elegantly passed through the basket with a swish. As the points were scored, the referee called for a timeout for Fukuda Sogo, prompting both teams to return to their benches. Thanks for the timely timeout, Alex. I just did what I was supposed to do. Suna thanked Alexandra for calling the timeout, and she responded with a nonchalant shrug. He had signaled for the timeout when he noticed Kai's imminent move on the court. Observing Haizaki's reaction confirmed that he had undergone a change. Suna recognized that it was the right moment to adjust his strategy to counter Kaijo's evolving offensive play. Haizaki glanced at the scoreboard, which displayed a close score of 57-55. Despite still leading, he recognized the potential threat if he couldn't effectively stop Kai's. Captain, Haizaki suddenly addressed Suna, prompting everyone's attention. Suna raised an eyebrow, curious about Haizaki's unexpected behavior. I'm sorry, but I don't think I'll be able to stop Kai's. Please swap positions with me, Haizaki spoke, bowing slightly. His clenched fist revealed his internal struggle as he silently vowed, I can't be a burden. Fukuda Sogo couldn't afford any weaknesses. The shock was palpable among the team as Haizaki straightened his back and continued, I believe you are the only one who can stop him at this point. Haizaki's unexpected sincerity and genuine words left everyone in Fukuda Sogo momentarily silent with disbelief. Even Suna himself couldn't help but be taken aback by this unanticipated side of Haizaki. Observing Haizaki's sincerity, Suna couldn't contain a chuckle, which snapped everyone back to reality and left Haizaki wearing a confused expression. It's nice to see this side of you, Shogo. Keep it up, I'm sure everyone will like you more. Suna spoke with a light smile, acknowledging the positive change in Haizaki's demeanor. Ha ha ha, Captain's got a point, Haizaki. You're sounding like a real person now, ha ha ha. My best friend, you're quite a surprise. Laughter echoed as everyone chimed in. Haizaki could only scratch his head, glancing away in embarrassment at their reactions. However, the corners of his lips curled upward slightly. Suna grinned. Even without Haizaki explicitly asking for it, he was already planning to tweak their strategy a bit. Well, considering Shogo's suggestion, we're gonna switch up our strategy a bit this time. Suna said. He then turned to Haizaki and continued, you'll still be marking Kai's. What? Suna shook his head, gesturing toward Agiwara. With a smirk, he explained, not on your own, of course. That's why I'm putting Shigehiro on that duty to assist you. Haizaki widened his eyes in surprise. He then glanced at Agiwara, who gave him a thumbs up. Suna continued, isn't that what best friends do? Help each other out when things don't quite go as planned. Haizaki's lips twitched slightly, and this time, he refrained himself from retorting. Meanwhile, Agiwara was visibly moved, prompting Haizaki to think, should I smack this guy in the head after this? Chapter 213, Chapter 210, Crafting his signature move. Hey guys, got some good news to share. The X-ray results are in, and everything is fine. Turns out there's just a bit of inflammation in my joint, explaining the nighttime pain. So, no more sweet dreams for me. Sigh. Still, super relieved that everything's cool. And I'm sorry I haven't been responding to your comments lately. Dealing with this accident has got me feeling a bit overwhelmed with some additional IRL stuff. Anyway, happy reading. Shuzo, I need you to guard the area under our basket, just like you did against Yasen a while back. Tsuna instructed, and Nijimura nodded in acknowledgement, replying, sure thing, looks like it's time to break a sweat. With that settled, Tsuna had made the necessary adjustments to curb Kaijo's scoring spree. Shortly after, the timeout concluded, and both teams surged back onto the court. As the game pressed on, Tsuna took deliberate, slow dribbles, and his teammates began infiltrating Kaijo's defensive formation. Kasumatsu quickly closed in, applying pressure to Tsuna's seemingly relaxed demeanor. Looks like I'll have to take the reins myself, Tsuna thought, promptly altering the pace of his dribbling, eliciting a tense reaction from Kasumatsu. Amused by Kasumatsu's response, Tsuna chuckled, remarking, I won't be breaking your ankles anymore, Captain. Kasumatsu frowned at the comment. Just as he prepared to reply, Tsuna sharply executed a crossover, dismantling his defense and accelerating forward with speed. As Tsuna approached the basket, despite being marked by both Haizaki and Agiwara, Kais managed to slip out of their defense and approached him. Unfortunately for Kais, the ball disappeared with a flick of Tsuna's hand, leaving him in shock. Suddenly, a different presence leaped toward the basket. Kais widened his eyes as Nijimura slammed his hand toward the basket, and the ball, flicked like a meteor, sharply aimed where it should be. A resounding sound echoed as the ball swished through the net. As Tsuna returned, his gaze lingered on Kais, who was panting, seemingly struggling to maintain the current state that allowed him to copy the movements of the Generation of Miracles, the perfect copy. He should still be able to last a bit longer, Tsuna thought silently, considering Kais's improvement throughout the season. As they walked back, Moriyama walked behind the baseline. The ball found its way to Kais, who swiftly transitioned into a shooting motion. The ball soared in a high arc, swishing through the basket with Haizaki and Agiwara unable to stop Kais. Tsuna maintained his smile as he spoke while looking at Kais, who gazed at him provocatively, good, last a bit longer, I need you to do me a favor after all. Haizaki clenched his fist tightly as he had reacted a bit too late, and couldn't help but feel anger toward himself as he noticed Agiwara's quicker reaction. As time passed, Kais's perfect copy began to wear thin, and Nijimura, with a focused defensive strategy beneath the basket, effectively shut down Kaijo's players from scoring more points. No one, apart from Kais, could break past his defense. Kaijo High players were frustrated seeing the closely matched scoreboard with Tsuna consistently countered Kais's scores. On the other side, Haizaki gritted his teeth in frustration. Despite their efforts, they couldn't fully stop Kais. Shadowing Kais's every move, he realized they needed to change their approach. If they continued like this, double-teaming with Agiwara would become meaningless. Haizaki's frustration intensified as he watched Agiwara persistently utilize his beastly instincts to support him in stopping Kais. Racing with thoughts, he felt the urgency to make a decisive move. I need to do something. The idea of stealing moves from the Fukuda Sogo players crossed his mind, but he quickly dismissed it, aware that Nijimura would swiftly put an end to such attempts. Damn it, then what should I do? I need to come up with something different. As he spoke that, a realization hit him as his mind continued to race. That's it. Haizaki's eyes sparked with a newfound determination. It didn't have to be exclusively his own, as long as it wasn't stolen, it would still be something unique. No, it needed to be a creation entirely his own. He took a quick glance at his teammates and then turned his attention to Kais, who was currently imitating Ayamine's movements. Haizaki inhaled deeply, maintaining his defensive stance alongside Agiwara. Gradually easing his posture, he concentrated his mind and relied on his instincts for the pivotal moments ahead. The audience became increasingly rowdy, their cheers reaching a fever pitch as the excitement on the court intensified. Midorima instinctively rose from his seat. His eyes widened with realization upon observing a familiar transformation in Haizaki. Turning towards Tsuna, Midorima saw a sly smirk forming on Tsuna's face as he uttered, "This is what he was after." "What?" Kais was taken aback, sensing the shift in Haizaki's demeanor. The others on the court stared at Haizaki in astonishment, recognizing the now relaxed yet predatory stance that had become all too familiar in their matches. Did he steal his own teammates' beast instinct? Would that even be possible? Kasumatsu thought silently. However, seeing Agiwara still able to keep up his own beast instinct completely denied that possibility, which made Kazumatsu's eyes widen in realization, then, he's tapping into his own beastly instinct. The others in Fukuda Sogo happily laughed, witnessing Haizaki craft his own approach this time. Meanwhile, Tsuna's expression brightened as his lips curled up in a smirk as he muttered, "I guess I owe you a favor now, Ryota. You're, indeed, my best friend." Agiwara muttered loud enough for Haizaki to react, his lips twitching in silence, almost breaking his stance. With both of them tapping into their beast instincts, their coordination and movements became seamlessly synchronized. They put stronger pressure on Kai's, who attempted a sudden cross to the left side of Agiwara before sharply spinning to break his defense. But, like a ghost, Haizaki arrived with precise timing, making Kai step back as he realized it was tougher to break past their double team. Still, determination gleamed in his eyes as he shouted, "Then, I don't need to break past." He spun his body, prompting Agiwara to be alarmed. It was a move all too familiar to him. "It's Kuroko's Cyclone Pass!" Agiwara exclaimed. Haizaki's eyes widened as he reacted swiftly, closing the distance between him and Kai's. In a rapid motion, he struck his hand forward, aiming to graze the ball out of Kai's grasp. The air crackled with intensity as the three players struggled to thwart each other's attempts. Despite their concerted effort, it proved futile as Haizaki found himself a split second too late, desperately reaching for the ball that had already departed Kai's hand. The ball traversed the court with a powerful motion. It seemed to defy the laws of physics, curving through the air with precision. As if guided by an invisible force, it made its way toward Hayakawa's waiting hand, completing a seamless transition that left the spectators in awe. Kazumatsu's face lit up with excitement at the impressive play, and he couldn't contain his enthusiasm. "Freaking monster! Sorry to cut your joy short, but you seem to forget where he stood." Tsuna's words sliced through Kazumatsu's excitement. Without missing a beat, he swiftly moved, catching Kazumatsu off guard and disrupting the moment. As Kazumatsu was in the process of readjusting his position, he abruptly halted his steps. His eyes widened in surprise, his expression shifting from anticipation to disbelief. A figure emerged and swiftly approached Hayakawa with decisive power. "Fuck, he's walking into a lion's den." Kazumatsu cursed under his breath, swiftly turning to chase after Tsuna. However, Nijimura's move was so potent that it left Hayakawa unable to counter, rendering him helpless as the ball immediately transferred into Nijimura's possession. Without wasting a second, Nijimura executed a powerful pass, sending the ball soaring toward Tsuna. Chapter 214, Chapter 211, Kaijo's Wake-Up Call. Kaijo's in a tight spot. Ayamine mumbled, catching Momoa's glance before she refocused on the ongoing match. Observing Tsuna secure the ball effortlessly and charge toward the basket, she muttered, "Yeah, things aren't looking good for Kaijo." Her eyes gleamed with calculation as she watched Tsuna on the court. He's holding up well even in the second half. To think that Tsuna still had that much stamina left, even in the third quarter. She couldn't help but sigh at how ridiculous it was. Momoa then remarked, just as expected from Tsuna, "I guess." Ayamine glanced at Kai's, heavily panting, and sighed. "He's running out of steam," he observed, shaking his head lightly. Ayamine almost felt bad for Kai's, unable to bring the main boss to the ring while pushing himself to the limit. When he faced Fukuda Sogo, he went up against the main boss right away. Despite losing, it was an honorable defeat. However, Kai's was not in good shape without the main boss personally taking him out, which was unfortunate. Looking at Kai's expression, Ayamine could sense the frustration bubbling within him, a sentiment he understood. "If I were in his shoes, I'd be feeling the same." Back on the court, Kaijo's coach furrowed his eyebrows, observing the ongoing game. "We had the momentum earlier, but it got shut down pretty quickly." Takuchi grumbled in annoyance, glancing at Tsuna's figure and Nijimura, who was the main culprit behind all this. Especially that young captain. He shifted his attention toward Tsuna, who was mirroring Kazumatsu's movements as he held the ball. "No, I should call him a young demon, hey? He's definitely not playing at a high school level." The advantageous situation Kai's had created moments ago had now dissipated. "Damn it! I've lost count of how many times I've said this, but this guy is way beyond our league." Kazumatsu cursed under his breath, feeling the intense pressure and focused Tsuna emanated as he effortlessly mirrored his every move with ease. Besides that elusive dribble and pass Tsuna had demonstrated, his gameplay mostly consisted of fundamental movements. Surprisingly, even with such basic actions, he managed to confound his opponents, rendering them incapable of making a significant impact on the game. Even if he was on the level of the generation of miracles, he shouldn't be this consistent. Kasumatsu was having a hard time wrapping his head around how Tsuna managed to keep up such steady movement and quick reactions throughout the game. Even Kai's would slip up from time to time, giving opponents a chance to capitalize on mistakes. While he had managed to score earlier, Kasumatsu recognized that it was often because Kai's acted as a catalyst. But this guy, no, this demon. How does he maintain that unwavering precision and reaction speed, always seeming impenetrable? Kasumatsu clenched his teeth in frustration, taking a step back. In response, Tsuna adapted seamlessly, adjusting his footwork to shadow Kasumatsu's movements. Takuchi observed with a deepening frown, witnessing the intense showdown between the two team captains. Even Kasumatsu couldn't figure out a way around him. Hey! He mumbled, noting Kasumatsu's apparent struggle. The only option left for Kasumatsu was to pass the ball he held in his hands to Kai's. However, as Takuchi shifted his attention toward Kai's, his eyes widened in disbelief, and he cursed, "Shit! I made a grave mistake." With a sense of urgency, Takuchi immediately requested a timeout while shooting a glance at Kai's. He was now dribbling the ball at a deliberately slow pace. Kai's eyes gleamed in a fierce yellow light as he copied Amine's movements and continued his dribble as Agiwara and Hizaki swiftly approached, determined to shadow his every move. Hizaki furrowed his eyebrows slightly as he moved in closer. Upon closer inspection, he noticed something unusual. Kai's breath had become heavier, and his jersey was drenched in sweat as if he had just emerged from a sauna. And it wasn't just that. He's getting slower. A sly grin crept onto Hizaki's face as he saw an opportunity. Sharply closing in, Hizaki reached out to grab the ball from Kai's, who was showing signs of fatigue. Realizing the danger, Kai's quickly stepped back to avoid Hizaki's attempt to steal the ball. Just when Kai's thought he had dodged the threat, Agiwara swooped in from behind, snagging the ball with a quick move. "Damn it! I was careless," Kai's muttered, clearly frustrated by the unexpected turn of events. Without wasting time, Hizaki snatched the ball back and sprinted ahead. Despite Kai's seemingly slower pace, he proved to be no easy opponent. In a split second, he reacted with agility and chased after Hizaki, who had attempted to create some distance. Feeling the pressure of Kai's impending presence, Hizaki clenched his teeth in response to the looming threat from behind. "I get it." In a moment of acknowledgement, Hizaki begrudgingly recognized Kai's prowess. Even though Kai's seemed to be operating at a slower pace, he was not someone he could take on alone. Hizaki's voice was laced with frustration as he muttered, "He's definitely better than me." However, amid the frustration, Hizaki's eyes sparked with determination as he proclaimed, "But I'm not alone in this." In a surprising turn, Hizaki nonchalantly passed the ball from his back, catching Kai's off guard. Kai's widened his eyes in astonishment as Agiwara's figure emerged from behind Hizaki. "Shit!" The realization hit Kai's just as Hizaki made a sharp move past him. Simultaneously, Agiwara tossed the ball into the air, perfectly timed for Hizaki to deliver a thunderous finish at the basket. Whoa! I had no idea Fukuda Sogo had players like that. Holy crap! Their synchronization was almost perfect. It's like they share the same brain with two bodies. The crowd erupted into loud cheers after witnessing such seamless coordination between the two players. However, the game came to a sudden halt as the referee blew his whistle, signaling the timeout requested by Kaijo Hai. Caught under Takuchi's intense glare, Kai scratched his head sheepishly and chuckled, "Looks like I got busted." The rest of Kaijo Hai noticed their coach's piercing gaze on Kai's, widening their eyes in realization as they glanced at Kai's fatigued expression. Getting carried away after gaining momentum, we overlooked such an essential factor. Kasumatsu tightly gripped his fist in frustration. He felt the blame squarely on his shoulders for allowing such a lapse, as it was his responsibility to oversee the team, and he had failed by letting Kai's end up in this condition. Chapter 215, Chapter 212, Coach's Dilemma. Whoa! We actually took down Kai's this time! Agiwara exclaimed with excitement as he walked alongside Hizaki towards their bench. However, Hizaki didn't share the enthusiasm, shaking his head. "Why aren't you thrilled, buddy? I thought you'd be over the moon." Agiwara tilted his head in confusion, observing Hizaki's subdued reaction. Hizaki sighed as he explained, "We were able to do it mainly because he was exhausted." While it was a significant achievement to suppress Kai's this time, Hizaki recognized that it was primarily due to Kai's fatigue. Silently, he watched Kai's on the opposing side as they took their seats on Fukuda Sogo's bench. However, one thing was certain. "So what if you are better than me? You'll still lose in the end, Ryota." Meanwhile, the atmosphere at Kaijo High was somber. Every face either looked grim or concerned as they cast glances at Kai's, who awkwardly scratched his head, feeling the weight of his teammates' stares. "We're subbing you out for now, Kai's," Takeuchi suddenly announced, prompting surprised expressions from everyone. Considering Kai's condition, it was the right decision if they wanted him to regain full power in the last quarter. While they couldn't expect Kai's to perform perfect copy as aggressively as before, a period of rest could help him recover some of his stamina. "What? Coach, I'll do anything for the team, but not this." Unfortunately, Kai's was reluctant to be subbed out. Takeuchi sighed at Kai's reluctance. As much as he wished for Kai's to remain on the court, doing so might push Kai's to resort to perfect copy to gain an edge against Fukuda Sogo. Why? Because that was Kai's nature, that was his character. Kasumatsu jabbed Kai's in the stomach, causing Kai's resolute expression to falter in pain as he groaned before turning to Kasumatsu with an annoyed look. "Don't underestimate us, you idiot." Kasumatsu spoke with solemnity, making Kai's flinch. But Kasumatsu wasn't finished. He continued, "If coach says you're out, you're out. Don't be stubborn, just do as he says." "But..." "No buts." Kasumatsu cut off Kai's response before it even left his lips, displaying firm decisiveness that caused Kai's to grit his teeth in response. Seeing Kai's go silent, Kasumatsu hoped that Kai's would comply as he was feeling relieved silently. Though he didn't want Kai's to be subbed out, it was for his well-being after all. Pushing himself too much would be detrimental to his body, and Kai's pitiful state during the inter-high against 2 Academy was enough of a lesson for him to understand that allowing Kai's to persist would only lead to injury. However, Kai's suddenly stood up tightly gripping his fist, and Kasumatsu frowned at the determination in Kai's eyes. "You can't sub me out. Not in this game," Kai's vehemently declared. Kasumatsu's frown deepened, etching lines of frustration and concern on his face. As he was about to retort, Kai's shook his head with an intensity that matched the urgency in his voice. His hand pointed accusingly at the scoreboard, where the stark numbers 71 to 70 glowed ominously. "Our situation is already looking bad," Kai's asserted, the desperation evident in his eyes. "And if you bench me, it's gonna get worse." Kai's words hit the team hard. They all went quiet, heads down. It felt like Kai's had just rubbed salt in their wounds. They wanted to argue back, but their rebuttals were stifled by the uncomfortable truth that Kai's had laid bare. Seeing the team silenced by his words, Kai's slightly looked away, realizing he might have hurt them. Though he felt bad spelling it out, it was true. With Hizaki and Aguera working together, the short-lived advantage they had gained quickly slipped away. Just like Kai's warned, if he got subbed out, Fukuda Sogo wouldn't let this chance pass, especially against Tsuna they'd be in trouble. Thinking about it frustrated Kasumatsu, who stayed silent, clenching his fist. Normally, he'd be tempted to give Kai's a piece of his mind for saying something like that, but this time, he couldn't argue because it was just the reality of the situation. And facts, well, they hurt. Observing the unfolding scene, Takeuchi sighed and slowly began, "Fine, I won't sub you out." Everyone's eyes widened at their coach's unexpected decision, and they turned their attention sharply to him. Kai's expression brightened, though he wore a hint of confusion as he asked, "Really?" Takeuchi nodded solemnly. "But, you have to play by my rules this time." He spoke, making Kai's listen attentively. Despite his trembling hand from excitement at the prospect of not being subbed out, he understood that there were still conditions attached. They probably won't take Kai's out. What? Why not? Doesn't he need time to catch his breath? Nijimura questioned Tsuna after hearing these words. The same curiosity spread across everyone in Fukuda Sogo. Especially for Hizaki, whose gaze intensified at the mention of Kai's. Tsuna nodded, explaining, "Their coach should know that benching Kai's would mess up the current balance of the game. And if he does decide to bench Kai's, I'll take advantage of that weakness to cause some serious damage." Tsuna considered, glancing at the scoreboard that displayed closely matched scores. "Looks like I'll be breaking a sweat again." Nijimura sighed, realizing he had to once again thwart Kaisa's attempts. Despite his best efforts, Kaisa's skill in replicating the generation of miracles moves during his offensive plays proved challenging to counter. And stopping Kaisa's advance was indeed a tough task. However, Suna shook his head in response to Nijimura, saying, "You won't have to handle that much pressure." "Why is that?" "Because Kais won't be able to use his perfect copy for a while." Suna's eyes gleamed with a cunning light. Kais was tired, and to last until the final quarter, he needed to save the use of his perfect copy for the right moment. "He's been using it for 5 minutes now." Suna silently thought while shaking his head. Kais could only sustain his perfect copy in the original canon for precisely 5 minutes. But at present, that 5-minute mark was not his limit. "So, are we sticking with our current strategy?" Nijimura inquired, prompting Suna to chuckle, leaving everyone perplexed. "Well, technically, you're correct," Suna replied with a smile. He then cast a glance at Kaijo High's players, and his smile gradually transformed into a smirk, causing everyone in Fukuda Sogo to flinch. "But we're going to up the ante once again. No need to hold anything back this time, let loose." Suna's eyes gleamed with determination. It was about time for him to execute his finishing move. Chapter 216, Chapter 213, Desperation vs. Dominance. As the game continued, Kaijo High seemed to be fueled by determination to extend their lead and provide Kais with a breather. Unfortunately, found themselves grappling with a harsh reality. Fukuda Sogo's players appeared to have harnessed newfound energy, intensifying their efforts on the court. The heightened vigor created a relentless pace that proved challenging for Kaijo to match. The absence of Kaisa's perfect copy left a palpable void, especially when it came to breaking through Nijimura's formidable defense. The realization dawned on them that without Kaisa's exceptional abilities, navigating past Nijimura's tactics had become an uphill battle. After all, Nijimura was the kind of player who could square off against Murasakibara with confidence. Though not the current Murasakibara, as Tsuna had unleashed the wild beast within. In the face of Fukuda Sogo's increased aggression, the players from Kaijo High could only clench their jaws in frustration. The widening score gap served as a painful reminder of the challenges they now faced. "The tempo has shifted once again," Izuki observed with a solemn expression. The members of Siren shared similar looks as they attentively followed the ongoing match between Fukuda Sogo and Kaijo High. Kuroko displayed a particularly concerned expression, his gaze fixed on the fatigued figure of Kais on the court. "Looks like they're attempting to stall," Hyaga remarked, discerning Kaijo High's strategy. Kiyoshi concurred, redirecting his attention to the players of Fukuda Sogo. "But their opponents aren't giving them any opportunity to do so." Aida nodded in agreement, echoing the sentiments of her teammates. She shifted her gaze to Tsuna, contemplating, "He's the one orchestrating Fukuda Sogo's moves." In the previous round, when Siren sat together with Ayamine and Momoa, Aida had made efforts to learn more about Fukuda Sogo through Momoa, who was more acquainted with them. From that discussion, she gleaned insights into the team's dynamics. "He's the one behind everything," Aida asserted, her expression growing serious. Faced with such a formidable adversary, she couldn't help but feel a sense of uncertainty. "Man, Kaijo is getting totally thrashed," Kotaro exclaimed loudly with excitement, causing Mibuchi to sigh and shake his head gently. No matter how many times they had been together, Kotaro's boisterous behavior never failed to make him feel tired. Nevertheless, Mibuchi couldn't help but agree with him as he glanced at the scoreboard. They managed to close the gap in the score earlier, but now it's widening again. Mibuchi felt a sense of pity for Kaijo High as he muttered, "Very unfortunate. Damn. Did he step up the pace, knowing we were trying to buy time?" Simultaneously, Kasumatsu couldn't help but curse at the dramatic shift in the game's dynamics. He glanced at Tsuna's figure, dribbling the ball with an aggressive pace, his frustration evident. Kasumatsu felt like Tsuna had been anticipating their every move, closing in before letting out another curse, "Fucking bastard." Kasumatsu understood it was just the nature of the game. However, he still couldn't shake off the frustration, especially with Kais being suppressed by the combination of Hizaki and Agiwara. They were undeniably in a precarious situation. Tsuna noticed Kasumatsu closing in. Quick on his feet, Tsuna dribbled the ball between his legs and spun around, leaving Kasumatsu struggling to catch up. As Tsuna surged forward, he effortlessly slipped past Kasumatsu's defense. With momentum on his side, Tsuna redirected everyone's attention towards him, becoming the focal point of the court. Kaijo High players reacted swiftly, realizing the threat posed by Tsuna. They understood that allowing him to continue unchecked would result in more points for Fukuda Sogo, a risk they couldn't afford to take. Amidst the strategic response, Koburai stepped up as he started to approach Tsuna with calculated anticipation. Anticipating that Tsuna might pass the ball if left unmarked, Koburai slowed down, ensuring he had time to readjust. However, wearing a light smile, Tsuna countered, "You think I'd fall for that?" Koburai's eyes widened in shock as Tsuna seamlessly transitioned into his shooting form. Reacting quickly, Koburai propelled himself forward in an attempt to close the distance between them. Regrettably, he was a step too late. Koburai could only watch in helpless frustration as Tsuna released the ball, sending it in a perfect arc toward the basket. The net swayed gently as the ball passed through with a satisfying swish, adding another score for Fukuda Sogo. Tsuna shook his head lightly and calmly turned to walk back. Witnessing the effortless execution, Koburai could only grit his teeth in frustration while cursing under his breath, "Fucking bastard, he's so sharp." The basketball swiftly changed possession, finding its way into Kaijo High's hands. As the ball reached Kai's, he found himself thoroughly pressured as two figures closing in. Haizaki and Agiwara, like predatory shadows, immediately moved to suppress Kai's. Sensing the impending threat, Kai's gritted his teeth without utilizing his perfect copy ability. He found himself vulnerable. He was once a formidable opponent that could swiftly broke past their double team, yet he was now just a prey caught between two relentless predators. In a blink, Haizaki's swift movements overtook Kai's opening and stole the ball from his grasp. The frustration bubbled up in Kai's as Haizaki realized he couldn't pull off the flashy moves of the generation of miracles anymore, and there was no coordinated play with Agiwara to score. "Damn! Why am I so weak?" Kai's held onto his frustration, reminding himself not to use his perfect copy just yet. Why isn't he using his perfect copy anymore? Takao questioned, perplexed by Kai's decision to allow himself to be stifled by Fukuda Sogo's double team. Midorima shook his head in response, saying, "Don't be naive, Takao. It's not that he isn't using it. He isn't allowed to." Midorima continued, adjusting his glasses. Kaijo's coach wasn't foolish. He knew that if Kai's kept pushing himself with perfect copy, it might lead to injury. Given the current situation, as much as they desired to change their fate, it seemed nearly impossible. They were utterly powerless against Fukuda Sogo's overwhelming strength. "Hey? Why?" Midorima glanced at the scoreboard before sighing. They want him to save it for the right moment, but Tsuna saw right through it and seized this opportunity to silence them. As the third quarter concluded, Kaijo High could only gaze at the rapidly expanding score gap created by Fukuda Sogo. 91-75 within that short time? They're inhumane. Kaijo High stared at the scores in silence as frustration welled up within them. Chapter 217, Chapter 214, Revealing the Finisher. As Akashi observed the court, where players were making their way to the benches for a quick break before the final quarter, a hint of pity crossed his face. Mayuzumi noticed this and questioned, why is he feeling sorry for Kaijo? Despite Kaijo's evident struggle in the match, Akashi wasn't one to usually show sympathy. So, what exactly caught his attention and prompted that expression of pity? Mibuchi also picked up on Akashi's reaction and cast a frown in Kaijo's direction. They're definitely in a tough situation, but considering Kai's can still use his perfect copy, they shouldn't lose by much, right? You're being foolish again, Takao. Midorima sighed once more. Takao ran a hand through his hair in frustration at Midorima's reaction. The confusion was evident on everyone's faces as they struggled to grasp Midorima's elusive message. Do you even comprehend the kind of person Tsuna was? Midorima's expression turned grave, causing Shutoko to startle, their throats unintentionally tightening. Midorima held the belief that Fukuda Sogo's recent move wasn't Tsuna's ultimate move. Besides, he was confident that Kai still possessed the ability to unleash his perfect copy in the upcoming quarter. How did he come to this conclusion? Because that's simply who Tsuna was. And that's simply who Kai's was. Tsuna was not someone you'd want as your enemy. Midorima exclaimed, leaving everyone in disbelief. No one expected such a statement from Midorima, especially given his usual prideful demeanor forged through rigorous training sessions. However, he paid little attention to the reactions around him, focusing instead on Tsuna, who was engrossed in conversation with his team. Shaking his head, Midorima muttered to himself, that can't be his finishing move. Thinking back to Fukuda Sogo's strategy against Kaijo in the third quarter, Midorima was sure that Tsuna wouldn't resort to something so simple for his finishing move. It just wasn't Tsuna's style. Tsuna didn't just beat his opponents. He shut them down completely. He had a knack for seizing any chance his foes gave him, completely overpowering them and leaving no room for a comeback. He slowly but surely choked out their efforts until they faced the harsh reality that fighting back was pointless. It was like he silenced them, making them realize they should just keep quiet and accept their defeat. On the court, a heavy cloud seemed to hang over Kaijo High, casting a gloomy atmosphere. Kai's clenched his fist silently, feeling the weight of the situation. "I'm going to kick off the fourth quarter with perfect copy," Kai's declared abruptly, causing a mix of brightened and concerned expressions among his teammates. Kobarai voiced the worry in the air, "Are you sure? What if you end up hurting yourself?" Kai's shook his head, dismissing the concern. "I know myself well, no need to worry about that." Despite his attempt to reassure, Kai's words concealed a different reality. If surpassing his limits was the sole route to victory, he was prepared to do so without hesitation. It boiled down to his refusal to lose to anyone, not even Tsuna, the one who had triumphed over Aomine. "With my perfect copy, their double team was pointless," Kai's thought as his eyes darted towards the scoreboard. Despite the substantial gap in their current score compared to Fukuda Sogo's, Kai's exuded confidence. Certain that he could shift the momentum back in Kaijo's favor, he mentally prepared for the upcoming challenge. Kazumatsu's mind raced as he sought a strategy without relying on Kai's perfect copy. Frustration gripped him as he couldn't devise a practical plan to counter Fukuda Sogo's current momentum. The coach for Kaijo appeared lost in thought, weighing their options. Finally, he broke the silence, posing the question, "How long can you maintain that state?" Kai's was caught off guard by the inquiry, turning to Takeuchi for a moment. The question drew everyone's attention to Kai's. Understanding the duration of Kai's perfect copy was vital for them to change the course of the game, they waited eagerly for Kai's response with a hopeful expression. Feeling the weight of expectation, Kai's gritted his teeth and offered his answer, "I can last for about 3-no, I can push it to 4 minutes. He lied. Deep down, Kai's knew the truth. He couldn't sustain that level for so long, at best, he might manage around 2 minutes. "I could push it to 3 to 4 minutes if I really pushed myself," he silently added. Kai's response sparked a glimmer of hope in the eyes of everyone at Kaijo High. "Looks like there's still a chance." "Absolutely. Our ace never lets us down." Takeuchi furrowed his brows, scrutinizing Kai's expression. It didn't take long for him to realize Kai's was being deceptive, the slight tremble in Kai's pupils when their eyes met gave it away. He sighed and kept his thoughts to himself, thinking, "I failed as a coach." Even if he wished to intervene, there seemed to be no other viable option. Moreover, Kai's false confidence successfully boosted the team's morale once again. Revealing the truth now could be detrimental to their current predicament. Kazumatsu caught on to Kai's deception, frustration evident as he clenched his fist. Despite the urge to expose Kai's lies, he found himself unable to do so. "Sorry for being selfish, Kai's." His desire to win burned within him. This marked his final year playing for Kaijo High, and he yearned for some recognition that could potentially lead to a spot on the national team. He understood the selfishness in his wish, but he saw no alternative. Meanwhile, witnessing the hopeful expressions of his teammates intensified the pressure on Kai's shoulders. He clenched his fist tightly, determination gleaming in his eyes as he quietly declared, "Don't worry, I won't let any of you down." Shortly after, the brief break concluded, and both teams returned to the court. As the game resumed, Fukuda Sogo energetically added more points at the beginning, with Tsuna taking the lead. When possession of the ball shifted to Kaijo High, a sense of disbelief swept over everyone in the Kaijo team. All eyes focused on a specific figure. "Wa!" Kazumatsu found himself in a state of shock, his words trapped in his throat. Meanwhile, Kai's felt a mounting pressure as he dribbled the ball. He couldn't help but grit his teeth as he spoke, "I didn't expect I'd pull you into the ring at the least expected time, Kazumaki." The one now marking Kai's wasn't Agiwara or Hizaki, it was Tsuna. "Well, you've brought me quite a few surprises today, Ryota." Tsuna's signature smirk broke across his face as he closed in. Observing Kai's eyes gleaming, intensifying the color of his pupils, Tsuna chuckled slightly as he declared, "Unfortunately, we have to end this now." Chapter 218, Chapter 215, Crowning Glory. A while back. We'll switch back to man-to-man defense in the next quarter, Suna declared, catching everyone at Fukuda Sogo off guard. Despite the sudden interruption, they held their silence, sensing that Suna had more to share. Haizaki and Agiwara didn't voice any objections, even though this decision marked the conclusion of their double-team strategy. With Kai's unable to pull off his perfect copy and mimic the Generation of Miracles moves, Haizaki figured he could handle him alone and neutralize any threat. But we're gonna tweak our positions a bit, he continued, a sly grin spreading across his face, causing everyone to unconsciously gulp. Witnessing their uneasy expressions, Suna chuckled, easing his own demeanor before turning to Nijimura. I need you to step in and mark Kasumatsu. Got it. Nijimura's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly nodded. Stick to marking Hayakawa, just like you've been doing, Suna added, earning Agiwara's usual bright smile in response. Haizaki's lips curled into a confident smirk, confident that he could handle Kai's on his own. However, Suna's next words left him stunned. And Shogo, I want you to handle Koburai in Nijimura's place. What? Haizaki couldn't believe what he had just heard, staring at Suna in disbelief. Just as I said, I'll personally take care of Kai's in the next quarter. Suna remained unfazed. He had achieved what he needed in today's game. Now, all that remained was to completely shut down Kaijo Hai and secure the win in their typical dominant fashion. Haizaki couldn't help but clench his fist slightly as he questioned, is it because you think I can't handle him? In his perfect copy, he'd overpower you. Although, if he can't pull it off, you might have the upper hand. Suna spoke bluntly, causing a twinge of frustration in Haizaki. Not because of Suna's words, he had long come to terms with the current reality. He still believed that with enough effort and improvement, he could turn the tables. But at the moment, he was simply incapable of doing so. Haizaki's frustration was mostly directed inward at himself. Don't overthink it. We can win, whether you handle him solo or with Agiwara, Suna said with a reassuring smile, slightly easing Haizaki's frustration. However, Suna wasn't finished. His expression shifted to a serious one as he continued, but simply winning isn't enough. Everyone was taken aback before realizing why Suna had to personally deal with Kai's. Excitement unconsciously curled up on their lips as Suna added, if we're going to win, we'll do it the way we always have. That's right. If they were going to secure a victory, they had to dominate their opponent thoroughly, just as they always did. It's how they lived up to their name. That's why they had to do it the way the King of Kings should. The basketball court was getting packed as both teams stepped onto the floor, and you could feel the tension building up. The crowd was getting hyped again, cheers echoing through the arena. Midorima was keeping a close eye on Suna, sizing up the competition. When the game kicked off, Fukuda Sogo wasted no time and made a quick move as the ball landed in Tsuna's hands. Suna didn't waste a second, either. Instead of taking it slow, he busted out a move that left Kasumatsu, the defender, in the dust with a slick crossover. Kasumatsu was caught off guard by this as he widened his eyes in disbelief, grappling with the realization that Tsuna's agility had ascended to an unforeseen level. Frustration edged across his face, he couldn't help but think, did he hold back since the start of the game? Yet, Suna remained focused. Ignoring Kasumatsu's flustered pursuit, Suna flicked his hand as the ball disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. A seamless transfer of possession materialized as the ball now rested in Agiwara's waiting hands. At the same time, on the other side of the court, someone else made a bold move. This guy rushed toward the basket and took a leap without the ball. Everyone from Kaijo watching held their breath in realization. You're all too late to stop this. Agiwara chuckled as he sent the ball back to Tsuna. Without missing a beat, Tsuna swung his hand again. The ball soared through the air, heading straight for Nijimura, who was mid-leap towards the basket, throwing down a slam motion, even though he didn't have the ball in hand. The ball sent flying by Tsuna's swift and precise flick, soared through the air and seamlessly aligned with Nijimura's forceful slam. The collision of the ball with the basket echoed with a loud and satisfying noise. The crowd was left in awe before their excitement erupted, filling the entire gymnasium with cheers and shouts. Kai's could only watch helplessly as everything unfolded too quickly for him to react in time. His eyes gleamed with a light that intensified the color of his pupils. Damn it! He cursed loudly, observing Nijimura land gracefully before returning to his position. Although they started off feeling pressured, seeing Kai's eyes that was gleaming with familiar light that indicate he was truly using his perfect copy, Everyone in Kaijo High were reassured that there was still chance for them. However, reality was harsh as they realized something had changed within Fukuda Sogo's formation. They went back to their one-to-man defense. Hey! Midorima thought as he watched how Fukuda Sogo players slowly shadowed every movement of each Kaijo High players before he turned toward Tsuna's figure as he sighed, "You're truly a scary person, Tsuna." This was Fukuda Sogo's way. No, Tsuna's way to end things. This was his finisher. The way to completely suppress Kaijo High. Kaijo High's hopeful expressions dimmed in an instant as they watched Tsuna closing in on Kai's, who deftly dribbled the ball in his hands. Kai's clenched his teeth, a determined look on his face. With a quick decision, he changed his pace, mirroring Amine's style, and executed a sharp crossover to the right. Tsuna, however, shadowed his every move with an unwavering focus. The court held its breath as the two players engaged in this intense dance. But Kai's maneuver didn't stop there. In a surprising twist, he took a step back, setting himself up for a shooting motion. In that moment, everyone's eyes caught a glimpse of Midorima's figure in Kai's line of sight as he leaped for the basket. Hope surged among the Kaijo supporters as Kai's prepared to take the shot. Yet, just as optimism filled the air, disbelief swept through the crowd. The ball in Kai's hand had vanished, leaving everyone bewildered as it bounced on the side of the court. In a flash, Tsuna had snatched it away. Midorima couldn't help but sigh, a twinge of pity for Kai's was evident in his expression. Undeterred, Kai's refused to back down. As Tsuna surged towards the basket, leaping with the grace of a seasoned player, a formidable presence reminiscent of Murasakibara's imposing stature enveloped the court. This time, Kai's channeled Murasakibara's strength, forcefully extending his hand toward the ball nestled in Tsuna's grip. However, Tsuna, seemingly anticipating Kai's move, displayed an uncanny agility. In midair, he adjusted his figure with an almost instinctive precision, skillfully evading Kai's powerful attempt to block his dunk. Frustration edged across Kai's face as he witnessed Tsuna smoothly slip past the basket. And just as Tsuna's figure hovered slightly beyond the basket, he executed a swift and unexpected move. Without even casting a glance at the hoop, Tsuna swung the ball in his hand, unleashing a no-look shot in midair. No matter how many adjustments you make by incorporating our moves against him, it will be useless if he can predict which move you'll make, Midorima silently muttered while observing Kai's frustrated demeanor as he shook his head. The more agitated Kai's became, the easier it was to predict his movements. That's why when facing someone as perceptive as Tsuna, it would be better to stay level-headed. Chapter 219, Chapter 216, The Impending Domination. Wah! How did the ball slip away from his hand? I didn't see it clearly. It just happened way too fast. The freshmen at Siren burst out in exclamations, their eyes fixed on the unexpected turn of events. Meanwhile, Hyuga and Kyoji wore grave expressions, their faces reflecting the seriousness of the situation. It happened really fast, but Fukuda Sogo's captain managed to graze the ball out of Kai's hand during the transition, Hyuga explained, leaving everyone's expression brimming with surprise. In the high-stakes clash between Fukuda Sogo's captain and the ace from Kaijo High, they engaged in a high-intensity play with lightning-fast movements. Hyuga keenly observed, realizing that, in the blink of an eye, an action unfolded that went unnoticed by most. As Kai's took a step back, Tsuna flicked his hand forward, skillfully grazing the ball in perfect harmony with Kai's movement. I get that he managed to graze the ball like that, which was impressive, but how did he execute it with such precision? Kyoji shook his head, letting out a deep exhale. He read Kai's movements like a book. Pardon. Kazama was familiar with all the generation of miracles movements and could predict which one Kai's was most likely to copy. He found a way to counter his defense and acted accordingly. Kuroko chimed in, providing a detailed explanation and dispelling their confusion. His gaze remained fixed on Kai's figure on the court, wearing an expression tinged with concern. While Tsuna may have been the one to ignite the idea of utilizing misdirection and had been Kuroko's benefactor in the past, Kuroko's bond with Kai's, forged over a longer period of friendship, made his worry for Kai's undeniable. Although Tsuna being Kuroko's benefactor was nothing but his own misunderstanding, his bond with Kai's was real. Aida silently echoed Kuroko's sentiment as she observed Tsuna's figure in the court. That's not the sole factor enabling him to predict which movement Kai's would use. Simply predicting Kai's actions based on behavior wasn't a skill anyone possessed easily. It was undeniable. Yet, the way Tsuna applied pressure, leaving Kai's with no option but to resort to a particular movement to counter it, and executing a strike exactly when Kai's followed the expected pattern, was even more formidable and terrifying. Such a terrifying person! She muttered, her eyes shifted toward Kaijo Hai's frustrated expression. Meanwhile, on the court, Kasumatsu clenched his teeth, witnessing the morale of his team gradually diminishing as he dribbled the ball forward. Bastard! He cursed in frustration, glancing at Tsuna, who shadowed Kai's closely, before redirecting his focus to his own situation, where Nijimura applied relentless pressure on him. Sweat trickled down Kazumatsu's face as he felt the weight of Nijimura's pressure. He didn't give me as much pressure compared to that nasty bastard, Kasumatsu acknowledged, realizing this as Nijimura executed refined movements, exuding a formidable pressure akin to that of a knight shadowing his every move. Although Nijimura's pressure was noteworthy, it paled in comparison to Fukuda Sogo's captain. Then, I should be able to break through. Kasumatsu declared with determination, inhaling deeply to steel himself for the challenge ahead. Without hesitation, he swiftly changed his pace, skillfully dribbling the ball behind his back to the left. Simultaneously shifting his body weight forward, he accelerated, once again showcasing an impressive display of ball control, maneuvering it between his legs with incredible speed. However, Nijimura remained as calm as ever, absorbing every move and adjustment Kasumatsu made, reacting with calculated precision to each shift on the court. Compared to Tsuna's pace, this is nothing. Nijimura pondered, his eyes flashing with a cunning light as he subtly shifted his body and adjusted his weight, preparing for what lay ahead. Sensing the opportune moment, Kazumatsu's eyes sparkled with a fierce determination. In a swift motion, he spun his body right in front of Nijimura, executing a move similar to the one that had failed to break through Tsuna's defense a while ago. The dribble aimed directly between his legs, intricately connected to Nijimura's legs as well. As the ball glided through his legs, Kazumatsu's face lit up with satisfaction, his agile form bursting forward to seize the ball that had slipped through Nijimura's legs. Yet, mirroring Tsuna's tactics, Nijimura swiftly stepped back, leaving Kasumatsu wide-eyed in disbelief. Did he manage to react? Kasumatsu exclaimed, though he didn't halt his movement, reassured that Nijimura wouldn't replicate Tsuna's feat. No, he won't be able to. As expected, I was a bit slow to step back. Nijimura softly acknowledged, realizing that his reaction speed fell short of Tsuna's, making the ball retrieval a more challenging task. However, a smirk played on his lips, sending a chill down Kazumatsu's spine as he detected a trace of Tsuna's expression in that smirk. I admit it, Kasumatsu. You're a great player, but who said I need to snatch the ball from you? With those words, Nijimura subtly adjusted his body, even at a slight distance from the ball. He then swung his hand behind and forcefully sent the ball flying right in front of Kazumatsu's eyes, who was just one step away from grabbing it. Kazumatsu's eyes widened in frustration as he silently muttered, I'll do it faster next time. Nijimura keenly observed Kazumatsu's expression, detecting a silent determination in those pupils. He shook his head slightly in pity and mumbled, well, good luck trying, because that move. The ball sailed toward Haizaki smoothly as Nijimura added, won't be yours anymore. Feeling Nijimura's gaze on him as he secured the ball, Haizaki let out a slight chuckle, causing a hiss of pain to escape his lips. His entire body still ached from Nijimura's beating, and he muttered, fucking bastard beat me to a pulp, and now he dares to ask for a favor. Despite the pain, a smirk played on Haizaki's face as he began to dribble the ball in his hand, his eyes scanning the Kaijo High players currently marking him. Whatever, Haizaki clicked his tongue, briefly glancing at Tsuna's figure before shifting his gaze back to Nijimura, locking eyes with him. Just know that I'm not doing this because you asked me to. Haizaki altered his dribbling pace, leaving the defender who marked him flustered. He declared, I'm doing this simply because it's our captain's plan. Chapter 220, Chapter 217, Slow Descent into Despair. As Haizaki advanced with the ball, Kobarai shadowed his every move, sweat rolling down his face in intense focus. Observing Kobarai's exhausted state, Haizaki chuckled and said, you seem tired. Why not let me pass? Do you think I'd allow that? Kobarai retorted with a frown, swiftly closing in to increase the pressure as Haizaki slowed down. Haizaki shook his head in pity at Kobarai's response, mumbling, that's unfortunate. But I don't need your opinion anyway. Move out. Haizaki's voice sliced through the air like a blade. Without waiting for a response, he surged forward, the basketball dancing beneath his skilled fingertips. The sudden acceleration sent a shiver down Koburai's spine, prompting him to adjust his stance in anticipation. Haizaki worked his magic, seamlessly guiding the ball behind his back to the left. The movement was swift, almost too quick for the eye to catch. Simultaneously, he shifted his body weight forward, transforming the court into his personal stage. A breathtaking display of ball control unfolded. The ball darted between his legs with an almost hypnotic speed, leaving onlookers in awe. Meanwhile, the familiarity of Haizaki's mesmerizing dribbling sent a jolt through Koburai, prompting an instinctual alarm to flare within him. Suddenly, Haizaki pivoted, executing a move right in front of Koburai. It mirrored Kazumatsu's failed maneuver from earlier, prompting Koburai's eyes to widen in realization. Shit, this fucker stole Captain's drive. But realization struck too late as Haizaki seized the opportunity, dribbling forward with the precision of a maestro. The ball was aimed directly between his legs, intricately connected to Koburai's own. Haha fucking easy. As the ball glided through the narrow gap of Koburai's legs, Haizaki's mocking laughter echoed. His agile form burst forward, claiming the ball that had slipped through, leaving Koburai in a moment of defeat. Kasumatsu clenched his teeth, watching the scene unfold. As he attempted to chase after Haizaki, Nijimura's imposing figure appeared before him, obstructing his view. Well, it looks like you're in a hurry, Captain. Nijimura remarked, prompting Kasumatsu to scoff. I thought only your captain had a bad attitude. It seems like I was wrong. Kasumatsu growled, adding, every single one of you is a pain in the neck. With a resounding slam echoing across the court, Nijimura quickly made way for him. Bitterly, Kasumatsu could only watch as Haizaki landed on the ground after scoring more points for Fukuda Sogo. Kaijo Hai seems to be suffocated. Atsubo slowly muttered, his face edged with a grim expression. The others in Shudoku concurred, nodding seriously as they observed the unfolding game. Kaiza's perfect copy was tricky, but it pales in comparison to Fukuda Sogo's captain. Miyagi spoke, his voice trembling. He had been thoroughly impressed by Kaiza's ability to seamlessly incorporate the Generation of Miracles movements. However, he was now shocked to see such a formidable opponent like Kai's being effortlessly subdued by Fukuda Sogo's captain, Tsunayoshi Kazama. Midorima quietly adjusted his glasses, observing as Kasumatsu persisted with his drive, attempting to replicate the move that had nearly succeeded against Nijimura's defense moments ago. His resilience is commendable, but... Midorima began, his voice measured. When Nijimura effortlessly thwarted Kazumatsu's attempt once more, Midorima shook his head and continued, his rhythm is off now. Midorima could empathize with Kazumatsu's frustration. After all, Kasumatsu was just a hair's breadth away from breaking through Nijimura's defense if he had been slightly faster. It was a small step towards making a crucial change in their current situation. A change that they desperately needed. Had it been a regular team, Kasumatsu might have succeeded this time, considering Nijimura's inability to match a slightly faster pace in his drive. Unfortunately, Kazumatsu's hopeful notion of effecting a small change was shattered, as Fukuda Sogo had Haizaki, who was capable of stealing the move. This way, one of their dimly lit candles of hope was extinguished. And this is only the start. Midorima understood that completely suppressing the opponent's formation still allowed them some room to maneuver. Fukuda Sogo aimed for more. Silencing Kasumatsu was merely the first step. Midorima observed in silence as the game unfolded. With Kasumatsu effectively neutralized in his attempts to break through, Kaijo shifted their focus to other areas. And that's a mistake from Kaijo Hai. Midorima sighed, shifting his gaze towards Tsuna's smirking face on the court. He was anticipating exactly this reaction from them. Kaijo attempted to leverage every resource at their disposal, starting with Moriyama and his unorthodox shooting, trying to create distance before having his move thwarted and the ball stolen by Haizaki. Had Kaijo Hai been more level-headed, they might have discerned Fukuda Sogo's strategy, or rather, Tsuna's intention. However, it was the last quarter, and desperation clouded their judgment. Understanding Moriyama was their done for, they aimed to play for a rebound with Hayakawa. The cycle repeated until Kaijo Hai was left clinging to nothing but a wishful hope for victory. Looks like they've finally grasped the gravity of their mistake. Midorima continued his thoughts as he observed the expressions of disbelief on Kaijo's face. However, it was too late. Fukuda Sogo didn't aim just to suppress their opponent. Their goal was to utterly annihilate the opponent, leaving them defenseless and unable to resist. With Haizaki dismantling their rhythm, Kaijo Hai found themselves completely stripped of their weapons, while Fukuda Sogo held a nuclear bomb. Tsuna dribbled the ball in his hand, and Kai's looked at him in disbelief. Why? Cat got your tongue. Tsuna's words snapped Kai's back to reality. A surge of frustration consumed Kai's as he relentlessly shadowed Tsuna's every move, their paths intertwining across the court. Kai's noticed the once hopeful expressions of his teammates had now turned hollow. Tsuna's ruthless strategy had extinguished the gleam of hope in their eyes. Damn it! Why? Why be so heartless? Kai's exclaimed loudly as Tsuna stepped back, deliberately slowing the tempo. Observing this, Kai's closed in, Tsuna dribbling the ball effortlessly even with Kai's in close proximity, prompting him to speak slowly. Why, you said. His expression slowly morphed into one of nonchalance. Kai's entire body trembled as he locked eyes with Tsuna, whose gaze now lacked any hint of emotion. It felt as if those eyes were constricting around him. Tsuna continued, don't talk nonsense, Ryota. This is the nature of the game you chose to play. Do you realize what you just said? It's utter nonsense. Hearing these words, Kai's gritted his teeth. He acknowledged his own immaturity, but the frustration of seeing his teammates in despair was overwhelming. However, Tsuna was relentless. He abruptly altered the pace of his dribbling once again, effortlessly slipping past Kai's defense as he leaped toward the basket and executed a powerful slam. Kai's could only watch helplessly as Tsuna walked past him, leaving behind a remark, losing is frustrating, indeed. But it's a simple problem, just win. Hearing these words, Kai's widened his eyes in disbelief, gazing at Tsuna's retreating figure in stunned silence. Chapter 221, Chapter 218, Powerless. Kaijo High players' hearts sank as they found themselves powerless in the face of their dire circumstances. Any glimmer of hope they clung to had vanished. Helplessly, they shifted their gaze toward Fukuda Sogo's players, feeling the weight of an unseen force pressing down on them. It was as if an invisible hand was tightening around their throats, squeezing the life out of them with each passing moment. In the midst of this suffocating tension, Takuchi could only release a weary sigh. His eyes, filled with resignation, scanned the unfolding disaster. With just a few minutes remaining until the referee's decisive whistle, Takuchi glanced at the scoreboard, revealing the dismal score of 128-75. Another heavy sigh escaped him. They couldn't even scrape together a single point in this quarter. The air was thick with despair, and the team's predicament seemed insurmountable. Tsuna's really going all out. Alexandra couldn't help but sympathize with their struggling opponents. Honestly, she never thought much of Japanese basketball to begin with. While the generation of miracles did surprise her, living up to Tsuna's hype, she couldn't help but feel they were still no match for him on the current stage. Glancing over at Tsuna, she shook her head, and he hasn't even pulled out all the stops yet. He probably won't even need those eyes of his, she added, observing the defeated expressions on the Kaijo players' faces. For Alexandra, Tsuna's sheer skill in handling his opponents made him a formidable force. She was convinced that his tactics alone could crush most teams in Japan, without even tapping into whatever those mysterious eyes of his could do. Man, they're getting totally wrecked. Kotaro expressed his sympathy. Looks like Kaijo High was just riding on Ryota Kai's skills. Without him, they're just a bunch of losers. Though it might seem a bit harsh, he labeled them as losers, considering their one-sided beatdown. However, Mibuchi, with a gentle shake of his head, responded to Kotaro's comment. It's not that Kaijo High was garbage, it's just that their opponent is on a whole other level, he mused, casting a careful glance at Tsuna's dominating presence on the court. Mibuchi then shifted his attention to Akashi, remarking in his mind, seems like he saw this coming. I guess it takes a monster to spot another one. A heavy sigh escaped him as he stood there, feeling dwarfed by these giants. The Kaijo High players weren't slouches, there was a reason they were counted among the favorites for the Winter Cup. Yet, in the presence of Tsunayoshi Kazama, they seemed like amateurs being toyed with. It was as if Tsuna was playing a strategic game, akin to Akashi's shogi-like approach. 2 peas in a pod, Mibuchi muttered, a bead of sweat forming on his forehead. The thought crossed his mind that perhaps their upbringing as heirs to conglomerate families had something to do with their shared, calculated approach to the game. Meanwhile, in the midst of the crowd, Kuroko clenched his fist, his expression darkening into a frown. The unfolding game brought back memories of Tiako, where they effortlessly played with their opponents. Despite knowing that Tsuna wasn't toying with Kaijo High, but simply displaying his playing style, Kuroko couldn't shake off the frustration. "Kais," he muttered, eyes fixed on the sorrow etched across Kais's face on the court. His frown deepened as he detected the haunting shadow of Tiako's opponents in the past, glancing at the hollow expressions worn by the Kaijo High players. The rest of the Siren players watched the ongoing game, beads of sweat forming on their faces. The intensity of the match wasn't lost on any of them. They had always known that Fukuda Sogo's captain was a formidable opponent. But witnessing the merciless way they were dismantling Kaijo High brought a chilling realization it was their true nature. "I remember him having a good time with Murasakibara not too long ago. I thought he was a decent guy," Hyaga muttered to himself. The gymnasium, now hushed with pity for Kaijo, amplified his quiet words, making them audible to everyone in Siren. "Guess Murasakibara was a special case," Kyoji sighed in response. Reflecting on it, Kyoji noted that Fukuda Sogo's opponents, without exception, ended up wearing the same hollow expression once they grasped the futility of their efforts to avoid a crushing defeat. Except for Yasenhai, where Fukuda Sogo's captain had some fun with Murasakibara, the others all ended up just like Kaijo, Kyoji remarked. As they watched the ongoing match, a collective concern lingered among them. Would they, too, end up like Kaijo? Throughout the tournament, they had carried a confidence, but for the first time, doubt crept in, casting a shadow over their certainty. Back on the court, frustration edged across Kai's face. He tasted the metallic tang of blood in his mouth, the result of biting his lips too hard. The intensity of the moment didn't deter him, though. Dribbling the ball defensively, Kais maneuvered around the court with Tsuna's figure hot on his heels, mirroring his every move in a seamless dance. Amid the game's intensity, Kais couldn't help but steal glances at his teammates. Their eyes had lost all color, resembling lifeless orbs, a visual testament to the pressure bearing down on them. God damn it! Why? Why? Just why? Kais couldn't contain his frustration, and the words escaped his lips as he continued to dribble. Tsuna, however, remained nonchalant, seemingly impervious to Kais's outburst. He understood that Kais's exclamation was not a question directed at him. In a calculated move, Tsuna sharply closed in. With a swift strike, he disrupted the rhythm of the ball in Kais's hand, snatching it away with precision. Immediately, Tsuna burst forward, taking possession of the ball and leaving Kais momentarily stunned. Despite the gnawing despair chewing at his soul, Kais summoned the strength to react. Tsuna slowed down his pace momentarily. This brief respite allowed Kais to gather himself, although the despair lingered beneath the surface. Tsuna, however, was quick to adapt. With a sudden change in dribbling speed, he left Kais gritting his teeth in frustration. Even in the heightened state of perfect copy, Kais found it challenging to match Tsuna's newfound pace. As Tsuna smoothly executed a sharp crossover, Kais bravely mirrored the move, only to realize his body had betrayed him, losing balance. The court seemed to shift beneath him as Tsuna suddenly made a step back. Startled and off balance, Kais struggled to find his footing, knowing deep down how pointless it was. His gaze stayed glued to Tsuna's composed form as he smoothly moved into a shooting stance. However, Tsuna's gaze didn't meet the basket, instead, it bore down on Kais. Locked in that intense stare, Kais felt a chilling coldness penetrating his soul, and he couldn't help but voice out his question once more, weakly. Why am I so weak? The only answer he got was the swish of the ball sinking through the basket, even though Tsuna hadn't bothered to look at it while shooting. Chapter 222, Chapter 219, title at the end of the chapter. The court echoed with the haunting tick-tock of the clock, each passing second a cruel reminder of the fading hope that lingered in the air. The once roaring cheers of the crowd had shifted into a muted murmur, the scoreboard coldly revealing the approaching loss. In the final quarter, just a handful of minutes left, and a tough opponent pushing Kaijo High to their limits. The vacant looks on his teammates' faces mirrored the heavy feeling in Kai's chest as he dribbled the ball. He didn't have to wait much before the ball landed in his hands, his teammates appearing to throw in the towel. The realization clenched his chest with frustration. Under the unforgiving court lights, their shadows painted a picture of despair hanging heavy over Kaijo High. It felt like victory had slipped away, leaving them only the bitter aftertaste of defeat. No, from the start, they never stood a chance against Fukuda Sogo High. As he glanced at his teammates, Kai's throat tightened, choked by the sheer frustration of it all. Feeling Tsuna's presence drawing near, Kais shifted his pace, defensively dribbling the ball. His thoughts were in turmoil. This wasn't just a game, it was a struggle against the looming threat of defeat, and he couldn't bear to see his teammates plunge into the depths of hopelessness. At this stage, winning felt like an unattainable fantasy, but that wasn't the main worry now. I don't care about beating them anymore, Kai's quietly voiced in his mind. No, what he couldn't stomach was watching his teammates surrender to despair. I couldn't let that happen. Tsuna sensed something off with Kai's, his eyes sharpening as he swiftly intercepted the ball. In that very moment, as Tsuna effortlessly stole the ball from Kai's once again, Kai's remained lost in his thoughts. Darting ahead with the stolen ball, Tsuna furrowed his brow, noticing Kai's seemingly frozen in place. He couldn't help but shake his head, looks like I really went too far. But then, something flared up inside Kai's, a fierce determination coursing through him like a wildfire. The score, the clock, the odds, none of it mattered anymore to Kai's. What he cared about was pulling his teammates out of the pit of despair. As if he'd discovered a path forward, Kai's eyes gleamed with newfound determination, a yellow spark streaking across his pupils. Meanwhile, believing Kai's had thrown in the towel, Tsuna shook his head in pity before casually leaping up to slam the ball down. However, Tsuna's eyes widened in disbelief. In the blink of an eye, Kai surged forward with a fresh speed, almost like a phantom by Tsuna's side. He thwarted Tsuna's dunk with a powerful block, sending the ball flying out of bounds. The crowd, momentarily hushed by the looming defeat, erupted into a collective gasp. Yet, Kai's face remained composed as his eyes locked onto Tsuna's surprised expression. Kai's came to a sudden understanding. He needed to be quicker, sharper, and just plain better. Not for the sake of winning, but for the teammates battling beside him. In the dwindling minutes of the game, he decided to become the guiding light pulling Kaijo high out of the shadows. Observing Kai's transformation, Tsuna couldn't help but chuckle. Well, this is unexpected. Kai's entering the zone caught Tsuna off guard. He knew Kai's had the potential, but he hadn't anticipated witnessing it unfold in this particular game. What the heck? Haizaki blurted out, disbelief loud in his voice. Fukuda Sogo's players mirrored the sentiment, their eyes fixed on Kai's in utter shock. Meanwhile, Kaijo High's players, who had been trudging through the darkness towards what felt like an inevitable defeat, snapped back to reality. All eyes turned to Kai's. His usual cheeky demeanor and annoying antics seemed to have vanished, replaced by a Kai's that emanated reliability. Kaijo High couldn't help but see someone so dependable that it choked them up with emotion. The hollowness in their eyes slowly gave way to color as they couldn't help but be moved by the transformation. Slap! A resounding slap echoed through the air, jolting everyone in Kaijo High. All eyes turned toward the sound, finding Kazumatsu's face now a bright red from his own palm. Wake up! His shout caught everyone off guard. Freaking wake up, you idiots! Look at our freshmen, fighting all alone. How dare you call yourselves seniors? Kazumatsu scolded, prompting them to lower their heads in shame. But Kazumatsu's words didn't let up. Stupid idiots, whether we win or lose, we can't let a freshman carry our sorry selves like this, got it? His words reignited the flickering candlelight within their eyes, each of them finding a renewed determination. Indeed, Kai's had showcased enough. He had displayed their embarrassment in the face of such a formidable opponent. Now wasn't the moment for sinking into despair, their ace fought alone, and the least they could do was rally behind him. Oh? Looks like they've come to their senses. Nijimura remarked, a bead of sweat rolling down his face. The expressions on Kaijo High players' faces now carried a fresh determination, a stark contrast to the gloominess just moments ago. Their eyes now held a spark of life, a far cry from the fading glint from before. Kai's awakening had truly stirred something within them. He's been pushing his perfect copy beyond its limits, yet he's entered the zone, Tsuna remarked, shaking his head in slight disbelief. But he got it. Tsuna resonated with Kai's determination. An unyielding determination to shift the odds despite physical constraints. The rush of adrenaline pulsating through the body, and a resolute gaze fixed on the intent to make a difference. To think I'd feel such nostalgia in this game. Tsuna smiled. Kai's eyes slightly widened in surprise, witnessing a smile on Tsuna's face that differed from his usual bored or professional expressions. It was a genuine one. As the ball found its way to Tsuna, he glanced at Kai's, who rapidly closed in, exerting immense pressure. This prompted Tsuna to let out another chuckle. Despite the chuckle, Kai's didn't flinch in the slightest. He remained focused, determined to halt Tsuna's advance. Witnessing Kai's determination, Tsuna couldn't contain himself. His face twisted into a smirk he attempted to suppress. However, he couldn't hold back, silently screaming in ecstasy, "I hit another jackpot!" Title: Kai's Awakening. Chapter 223, Chapter 220, Kai's Dance in the Zone. Wah! Siren was rattled, exclaiming in disbelief. Kai's entered the zone. Kagami muttered, eyes widening as he observed Kai's figure, which now seemed incredibly imposing. Kagane's throat tightened as he nervously swallowed, his eyes fixed on Kai's. Does that mean going up against him is like taking on the entire generation of miracles in the zone? Kai's, bathed in the ethereal glow of perfect copy, seamlessly merged with the zone's aura, creating an overwhelming presence on the court. Trying to mask his unease, Hyuga let out a dry laugh, fingers anxiously fidgeting with the frames of his glasses. Ridiculous is an understatement. This is like facing a basketball prodigy's fever dream. Meanwhile, Kuroko's darkened expression lit up with a subtle brightness, the corners of his lips tugging into a relieved smile. His invisible presence seemed to shimmer with renewed hope. It seems Kai's has found his rhythm. I'm glad, he said, a hint of optimism in his soft voice. On the court, Tsuna drew in a steadying breath, his eyes locked on the ball in his hand. In a heartbeat, he executed a lightning-quick change of pace, the sphere becoming a mere blur. The players from Kaijo High couldn't contain their astonishment, his speed surpassed anything he had displayed before. Kobarai's eyes widened, and he couldn't restrain himself from blurting out, "He's freaking ridiculous." Despite the collective gasp from the spectators, Kai's remained an oasis of calm amidst the storm. His expression betrayed nothing, a serene facade that mirrored flowing bamboo water, unperturbed by the whirlwind unfolding on the court. Tsuna closed in, swiftly ducking to the side and pulling a quick crossover to Kai's left. Kai's adjusted his footing, trying to keep up with Tsuna's moves. The Kaijo High guys clenched their teeth in frustration, muttering, "Is it really not enough even with the zone?" Unexpectedly, Tsuna didn't stop there. He spun around the other way, leaving Kai seemingly momentarily off guard. The Kaijo High players couldn't figure out the outcome. To their surprise, after eluding Kai's defense, Tsuna quickly turned back just as Kai lunged forward. It hit them. Kai swiped the ball during the confusion, and the Kaijo High crew was left momentarily stunned. Aguilera observed with a hint of awe as Kai managed to strip the ball from the captain's hand with astonishing speed during that spin. A chill ran down his spine. This opponent was indeed something to be reckoned with. He shifted a bit closer, applying pressure to the Kaijo High players he marked, contemplating the impending challenge. The rest of the team followed suit, adopting a basic one-to-man defense formation. There was an air of confidence among them, a belief that Tsuna could catch up, even against Kai's speed, which matched Amin's zone. However, Tsuna couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed by their expectations. He watched as his teammates exuded confidence in his abilities, assuming he could effortlessly bridge the gap with Kai's. A sense of speechlessness overcame him. How could they expect him to be omnipotent, excelling in every aspect of the game? Yet, Haizaki broke from the norm as he stepped up to halt Kai's in his tracks. The members of Fukuda Sogo collectively held their breath, surprised by this sudden move. Tsuna was equally caught off guard before he adjusted his path and headed towards the basket. The determined glint in Haizaki's eyes spoke volumes, conveying a purpose that Tsuna swiftly grasped. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a silent agreement that transcended words, exchanged in a fleeting yet profound gaze. On the court, Haizaki clenched his teeth, contemplating his unconventional choice. He noticed Kai's confident expression along with the glint of determination in his eyes. Haizaki boldly asserted, "I know he won't pass the ball in such a state." How did he know? The answer was simple: because he was Haizaki. Throughout his career at Teiko, coming across someone with skills akin to his unconsciously put Haizaki on edge. It made him subconsciously watch Kai's, quietly sizing him up. That's why he got a better read on him than anyone else at Fukuda Sogo. However, even with Haizaki closing in, Kai stayed cool and collected. Without wasting a beat, Kai instantly switched up the speed of his dribbling, turning it into a fast blur. It left everyone from Fukuda Sogo wide-eyed. The way he moved and dribbled was just like Tsuna's. No one could believe how closely he matched Tsuna's style. As expected, Kai closed in on Haizaki, their eyes locking in a tense exchange. Haizaki couldn't hide his frustration as Kai seemed oddly at ease despite the proximity, almost as if he had an upper hand in Haizaki's defensive stance. "You're underestimating me, Ryota," Hizaki's shout conveyed both anger and a hint of defiance as he subtly adjusted his footing, preparing to counter Kai's impending move. "You're the one who's underestimating me." However, Kai's response was calm and collected. The unexpected retort widened Hizaki's eyes in disbelief. Before he could grasp the situation, Kai's figure smoothly ducked to the right, executing a sharp crossover. Then, in a whirlwind of motion, Kai spun his body around with such speed that Hizaki, who had readied himself for the anticipated move, found himself unable to react. All he could do was watch as Kai effortlessly broke past his defense, leaving Hizaki in the dust, his figure growing smaller in the distance. "God damn it!" Hizaki cursed under his breath. He was well aware that he lagged behind Kai in terms of skill, but witnessing this new level that Kai had unveiled only served to widen the gap between them. Nevertheless, Hizaki wasn't blind to the bigger picture. He spotted Tsuna's figure entering the fray, muttering, "At least, I bought some time for him." With Tsuna now in front, Kai accelerated, his speed seemingly incorporating Amine's essence as he soared toward the basket. "Right in front of me," Tsuna muttered, realizing the imminent threat. Without hesitation, he leaped to block Kai's dunk. However, in the clash of hands and the forceful collision, Tsuna felt the unexpected strength. As his hand met the ball in Kai's grip, he was taken aback by the sheer power behind it. To his surprise, Kagami's figure seemed to emerge within Kai's form, adding an unexpected force to the move. Tsuna struggled to contain the power as the ball broke past his hand. Kai seized the opportunity and slammed the ball down the basket powerfully. The resounding sound echoed through the silent gymnasium while the spectators watched in awe. Do you want to read 15 chapters ahead of the schedule? Here's where you can find them. patreon.com/mythost. Comment. 28 Comment. Vote. Chapter 224, Chapter 221, Majestic Clash. Whoa! What the heck just went down? Holy smokes! They're finally pushing back. The crowd erupted in excitement once more. Nobody saw it coming. Kai's pulling off this unexpected power-up at such a crucial moment. Meanwhile, the Shotoku players found themselves in a state of disbelief. He overpowered Fukuda Sogo's captain. Takao mumbled, his words tinged with disbelief. It was common knowledge that Tsuna could hold his own, even overpowering Murasakibara, the powerhouse that was the center of the generation of miracles. Yet, such a guy of that caliber couldn't stop Kai's dunk? How did he manage that? Miyagi wondered aloud, shaking his head in an attempt to regain his composure. Midorima also found himself caught in a state of surprise, a bead of sweat rolling down his face before he instinctively adjusted his glasses. His gaze stayed fixed on Kai's on the court as he analyzed. Kai's accelerated using Amine's speed and jumped with Kagami's leaping power. He melded both elements into an unstoppable force that could overpower even Tsuna. True, I nearly forgot about his ability to copy their moves. And the speed, too. He replicated Amine's speed when Amine was in the zone? And Kagami's jumps when he was in the zone? That's absolutely unreal. To imagine he could blend their techniques to forge a more formidable force. How on earth do we stand a chance against an opponent like that if we ever face one? Hearing this, Midorima shook his head, a touch of skepticism in his voice. Kai's won't be able to sustain such a state for long. Meanwhile, back in the court. Tsuna landed on the court, his hand trembling from the powerful force he had just encountered. His gaze shifted from his shaking hand to Kai's retreating figure. Despite the intensity of the moment, Tsuna couldn't help but chuckle. Interesting. His mutter hung in the air, a prelude to the sudden shift in the atmosphere. A palpable pressure enveloped the entire court. In unison, they turned their attention toward Tsuna, who now wore a calm expression. Tsuna's dark eyes seemed to ignite with a spark that streamed across his pupils. His voice cut through the silence as he muttered, "Then, let's do it all over again, Ryota." The declaration reverberated through the gymnasium, and Kai's, who had turned to look at Tsuna, felt no fear. Instead, a grin curled upon his lips, revealing his excitement. As the game continued, the ball was immediately passed toward Tsuna as Fukuda Sogo understood that they couldn't intervene in a battle between two players who entered the zone. Dribbling the ball with deliberate slowness, Tsuna could sense Kai's intense focus. He recognized that even a slight lapse in concentration could cost Kai's possession of the ball, and a subtle smile played on Tsuna's lips. Without warning, Tsuna closed the distance between them, a move that caught Kai's off guard. It was as if Tsuna was conveying a message: no matter how skilled you are, I'll still be comfortable dribbling the ball, even with such a small space between us. Before Kai's could strategize for an opening, Tsuna surprised him by ducking in and executing a sharp crossover to the right. The court seemed to shrink as Tsuna smoothly spun his body in the opposite direction, mirroring the move that Kai's had stopped before. It was as if Tsuna was underlining a point: with them both in the heightened state of the zone, Kai's wouldn't be able to stop that particular move. Despite the challenge, Kai's didn't appear flustered. His movements took on a feline grace, akin to a jaguar, and the essence of akin seemed to assimilate into his play. He pivoted his body sharply, a determined pursuit set in his eyes, as he chased Tsuna, who had leaped into the air. Kai seamlessly channeled akin's speed, propelling himself forward with uncanny agility. His primary goal was to ensure that Tsuna wouldn't find the opportunity to alter his movement mid-air. With an almost instinctive awareness, Kai's made a swift transition, seamlessly adopting Murasakibara's defensive stance. In that crucial moment, he recognized the opportune instant to strike. Executing the move with meticulous precision, Kai's long reach allowed him to slap the ball out of Tsuna's hand. The ball found its way into Kazumatsu's hands, his jersey already damp with sweat from the intensity of the high-level play unfolding before him. Witnessing the seamless exchange, Kai's wasted no time and explosively burst forward, the court seemingly shrinking as he sprinted ahead. Right on his heels, Tsuna swiftly followed suit. In an instant, Kazumatsu assessed the situation. With a quick decision, he threw the ball ahead of Kai's, who effortlessly snatched it from the air. With the ball securely in his possession, Kai's wasted no time. He seamlessly assimilated akin's speed into his own, transforming his dribbling into a lightning-quick dance across the court. Tsuna shadowed Kai's every move as they swiftly approached Fukuda Sogo's defensive line. As they closed in on the basket, Kai's executed a move straight from Murasakibara's playbook, the Thor's Hammer. With a burst of acceleration from akin's speed, he soared into the air, his body rotating slightly before bringing both hands down for a powerful slam. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation as the ball hurtled toward the basket. Yet, in a split second, a shadow intervened, which made Kai's eyes widen in surprise. A hand belonging to Tsuna reached out and nudged the ball slightly off its intended path. Boom! The impact caused the ball to miss the mark, hitting the rim before bouncing off the court as the gymnasium echoed with the reverberation of the missed dunk. At that moment, Tsuna recognized the unstoppable force behind Kai's shot. Rather than attempting a direct block, he chose to divert the trajectory of the ball. Kai's clicked his tongue in frustration, observing Tsuna's calculated maneuver. Without missing a beat, Kai's set his sights on the bouncing ball, now in the possession of Fukuda Sogo's players. He wasted no time and went after Tsuna, who had moved quickly. They faced each other on the court, and a compelling struggle unfolded. Despite managing to break past each other's defenses, neither player could complete their finishing movements. It was a back and forth, with each trying to outmaneuver the other. Their movements unfolded like a tense dance on the court, inducing profuse sweating from players on both teams. The ongoing battle between the aces created a palpable atmosphere. Each attempted move met with a swift counter in a continuous give and take. In the gymnasium, the audience was swept up in the excitement of the game, captivated by the enthralling exchange between these two skilled players. Nijimura couldn't help but feel thoroughly surprised. It was the first time such a thing had happened. Tsuna always had the upper hand when facing the generation of miracles, even in the zone. I thought I had a good read on a person's level, but it seems like I'm still underestimating Kai's prowess. He muttered, eyes locked on the never-ending high-level play unfolding between these basketball monsters. Chapter 225, Chapter 222, Revealing his true strength. The crowd erupted into loud cheers, thoroughly engrossed in the ongoing match. The intense duel between the aces of both teams provided a thrilling spectacle. In the earlier showdown, Kaijo High secured additional scores thanks to Kai's entering the zone. However, the dynamics shifted when Tsuna, with his own entry into the zone, managed to level the playing field, keeping the score stagnant for a considerable period. As the duel pressed on, Tsuna felt an increasing sense of being submerged deeper and deeper into his consciousness. The relentless intensity of the match seemed to consume him. Kai sensed an unusual intensity emanating from Tsuna's focus. Despite this, Kai dismissed the feeling, choosing to focus on the game. Dribbling the ball with remarkable speed, he seamlessly integrated his moves with Tsuna before executing a swift crossover. Realizing that relying solely on akin's technique wasn't enough, Kai's amalgamated both of their moves to break through Tsuna's formidable defense. Wah! With the agility borrowed from akin, Kai's eyes widened in disbelief as he felt a subtle graze on the ball from behind. Tsuna's figure appeared, his hand outstretched toward the ball, causing it to slip from Kai's grasp. In a sharp motion, Tsuna snatched the ball away. A peculiar sensation gripped Kai's as he observed Tsuna's focus, a concentration that seemed to transcend its usual limits. Did he get even faster? How? Is he delving deeper into the zone? Confusion ignited in Kai's eyes, and a flurry of thoughts raced through his mind. As Tsuna advanced with the ball in hand, his consciousness reached a critical juncture, and he found himself looking around with an uncommon frown marring his face. This is unexpected. Unlike akin, who discovered someone guarding another door after the entrance to the zone, and Kagami, who experienced a similar phenomenon with Kuroko guiding him, Tsuna faced a different reality. He could only perceive an imposing wall that spanned the entire room, as if the existence of the door that led to the direct drive zone had never been part of his reality. He soon shook his head lightly at this. Surprise flickered across Tsuna's face, but he didn't let it bother him much. After all, he had the throne, and he couldn't help but think it probably rejected such an inferior setting. A chuckle escaped him, and he muttered, "Fucking arrogant. But, I like it. This just makes things more interesting. Let's see if they can push me to use that." A silent smirk played on Tsuna's lips as he snapped back to reality, moving forward with the ball in hand. Kai's was undeniably a genius. While Murasakibara wielded Herculean physics, Kai's possessed the sharpest mind. The ability to replicate a move with just a simple observation felt like a cheat code to success. It would be a lie if he claimed he didn't covet such a gift. But for Tsuna, it didn't matter. He firmly believed in the mantra that hard work triumphs over talent. That conviction fueled his determination, and now, he was playing with utmost seriousness. Nijimura and the others at Fukuda Sogo couldn't help but exchange surprised glances as they observed their captain's transformed demeanor. His presence had become refined and sharper, reminiscent of the time they witnessed him taking on Jabberwock single-handedly. Kai's doesn't stand a chance now. As Kai's closed the gap, Tsuna remained unfazed. With impeccable timing, he unleashed a sharp crossover, a move executed with such finesse that it left Kai's momentarily stunned. A sharp glint flickered in Kai's eyes as he reacted, attempting to put a halt to Tsuna's seamless advance. However, Tsuna seemed to have anticipated Kai's movement as he spun his body in the same direction. Without missing a beat, Tsuna approached the basket with a grace that hinted at an impending dunk. The court held its breath, spectators captivated by the fluidity of his movements. Simultaneously, Kai's form merged akin's agility with Kagami's leaping power. As he ascended, the looming presence of Murasakibara seemed to assimilate with Kai's figure. Kai's hand extended a determined effort to block the ball in Tsuna's possession. Disbelief flashed across Kai's face as the force behind Tsuna's dunk seemed to transcend all expectations. The sheer power behind the move shattered Kai's attempted block, leaving him momentarily frozen. With a resounding bam, Tsuna slammed the ball through the basket, the force of the dunk resonating through the gymnasium. The shockwave of the impactful play rippled through the air, leaving the crowd gaping in astonishment. Shotoku players found themselves involuntarily standing in shock, their expressions ranging from disbelief to awe. Midorima had his eyes wide open as he adjusted his glasses. Tsuna's figure elicited a complex emotion in him, and despite his reserved nature, he couldn't help but clench his fist tightly. Thoughts raced through his mind, will I be able to force him up to this point like Kai's did if we ever face each other again? Siren's players mirrored the astonishment, rising to their feet in collective shock. Words proved inadequate to capture the whirlwind of emotions that gripped them, and all they could do was look on with wide-eyed disbelief. Even Akashi, seated with his team, couldn't conceal his surprise. The attempted block was a spectacle that everyone, even those seated in the audience, could feel. Kai's had seamlessly combined akin's agility to accelerate his jump and then harnessed Kagami's jumping power, infusing his figure with an extraordinary force. To compound the challenge, Kai's had assimilated Murasakibara's defensive form mid-air, unleashing a powerful block that transcended Murasakibara's own raw strength. And yet, against all odds, Tsuna had broken through. On the other side of the crowd, akin couldn't conceal the widening of his eyes as he observed Tsuna's figure landing on the ground after the powerful dunk. Is this his true strength? Akin muttered with a hint of astonishment in his voice as he tried to comprehend the unexpected feat. Momoa was also frozen in a state of shock. Her hand instinctively covered her mouth, and her eyes widened as she stared at Tsuna's figure. A wry smile played on Alexandra's lips as she shook her head lightly, unable to contain her amusement. He's truly been pushed to be this serious. A sigh escaped her as she observed Tsuna's figure. Images of Tsuna's rigorous training from his early childhood flashed through her mind, eliciting a slight smile. It seemed, for once, Tsuna might find a bit of enjoyment in the game. However, her smile faded as she noticed something amiss. A frown creased Alexandra's brow before she sighed, "Never mind, not in this game, it seems."
Thanks for listening.